Meeting of the Brookline Board of Selectmen for tonight, Monday, November 10th, 2014. The board did have an executive session in which we discussed workers' compensation settlements and some non-union employee contracts. We've now left executive session and ready to take up the rest of the calendar. The first item is Selectmen updates and announcements, and Selectman DeWitt is prepared to update us.
I will only say that I want my colleagues to tell us about the Brookline Dancing Stars, report on that. I was unfortunately unable to attend, but I will make some other announcements very briefly, and then you guys can, or do you want to start with that?
Sure.
Sure, start with it.
It was very fun, and both of our town employee dancers did extremely well, Polly Selko and Chief Daniel O'Leary, and I've got to say the chief, dressed in Western garb.
Polo tie.
Yes, that one was quite humorous. I have actually recommended to his brother, who's a captain in the police department, that, you know, in that TV down in the main lobby of the public safety building, if they could run that, I think everyone would really enjoy it, because it was a highlight.
Well,
But Ken, maybe you can talk about it. It was a really wonderful fundraising.
It was a great event, and the biggest, best news first. I mean, they raised, the final number I don't know, but last year was considered a success at $80,000. This was well over $150,000.
oh, wonderful.
Wow.
Excellent.
The winning, they give two awards, one for the biggest fundraiser, one for the best dancer. In this case, it happened to be the same person for both, Jerry Billow, who's an attorney at Pasternak, Blankstein and Lund, and really...
He was dancing for the
really-
senior center,
really
but he
got
did
for the
it.
senior
It
center.
was a Michael Jackson.
He
Wow.
was also great and very entertaining, and he himself raised over $50,000.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
So is there
So
a
that
video
buys-
of
that-
this event so
Well,
that the rest of us
BIG was there filming.
good.
So I assume that they
will
will
become available?
run it at some point,
Yeah.
or that, you know, it will somehow be available. And, yeah, really don't miss the chief's exploits.
The senior center needs a new van, I wanted to say. and
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
This pays for the new van, so
That's fantastic.
great. So that's
It's a great event. I think Brookline Rotary has really done the town well, and I think it reflects on in my view, the great sense of community cooperation that we have, that it was not just the Rotary sponsor, but also the town employees as well as community members were part of it. It's just a great event, and the fact that it was financially successful as a fundraiser makes it even better, so fantastic.
Right.
Well
And
done.
we should say it was held in a pretty big hall and absolutely full.
full to capacity.
That's great.
To
That is
capacity.
wonderful. I'm so pleased to hear it. Okay, well, now we'll get on to this sort of Monday. This is a sort of a heads up. MWRA will be working on a water main on Fisher Avenue starting today, 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. I think this is somehow in support of the Fisher Park. No, not at all? Okay, not at all. I'm getting a nod from the expert back there. But for people who are driving through on Fisher Avenue, you should be aware that there will be a single lane of traffic. So it may be a street to avoid until December 31st, which is when the work's supposed to be finished. Tomorrow is Veterans Day and is a holiday, and there will be a very wonderful, thoughtful observation in front of Town Hall. There's a program book that everybody should have a chance to see. It's sponsored and hosted by the local VFW and American Legion posts, and a lot of events there are a lot of things that will happen during the observation, but in particular, I want people to know that they're giving a special award to Howard Carter, who was one of the last survivors of the Tuskegee Airmen. Tuskegee Airmen were African-American pilots and their crews who fought in World War II and struggled in the segregated military at that time, but have left quite a lasting legacy, and Mr. Carter will be here to get this award and perhaps will tell us something about his own experiences. On Wednesday night, there will be a Forum on Warrant Articles, sponsored by the League of Women Voters. It'll be in the BIG Studios on the top floor of the Unified Arts Building on Tappan Street. And I understand that it will be a lively event with speakers both in favor and opposed to various warrant articles and opportunity for questions. If you want more information, the website is www.lwvbrookline.org. On Friday, there'll be a special event, and maybe Ms. Paradis wants to tell us more about it, sponsored by the Brookline Recreation Therapy at the Brookline Senior Center, 93 Winchester Street, at 6 p.m. It's an acoustic coffee house for all ages with a suggested donation of $10, and it's meant to benefit Brookline High School teacher who suffered a serious illness after the birth of a child at the beginning of this school year. And I don't know if Ms. Paradis wants to give us some more, since you're here, by all means.
Yeah, so it is just like you said, it's a coffee house that we host a few times a year at the senior center. It is this time around to benefit, typically we have it to benefit Special Olympics or another charitable organization, but this is one of our own, a teacher from Brookline who took ill shortly after the birth of her first child and just before moving into her home. And I think everybody in town knows that this is going on. It's going to be a long haul for her. So it's as I said to Selectman DeWitt in my email, that it's a trifecta of three great departments coming together to support this effort. So we hope that
That's
people.
another wonderful example of how this community comes together around various needs. So thanks a lot.
Great, thank you.
And then one final note, actually two quickly. The Winter Farmers Market will be on Sunday afternoon in the Arcade Building, 318 Harvard Street, from noon until 5 p.m. Some of the vendors are the same from the Summer Farmers Market, and there are also some new vendors who come to the Winter Farmers Market. Finally, there is one more free flu clinic sponsored by the Public Health Department. It will be on Thursday, December 4th, from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. in the Health Department at 11 Pierce Street. And that's my announcements.
21st Century Gala, anybody know any?
It's this coming weekend.
I'm sorry.
It is.
It is, and I forgot about it.
It's, I believe on Saturday, I think.
Saturday night.
Saturday night, yep, you're right about that.
That benefits a fund at the high school, and so they do a lot of work on trying to erase the gap between students of color and other students, and a lot of their fundraising goes toward helping students that just are struggling.
That's right. Good. Anything else, Selectman?
I'll add
Selectman
that
Franco.
on Friday, I had the pleasure of representing this board at the inauguration of a new president at Pine Manor College. Joe Lee gave greetings on behalf of this board and the town and wished President Lee well on his journey at Pine Manor.
Very good. Thank you for doing that. So we'll move on now to our miscellaneous calendar. We have two sets of minutes for approval. The first is the minutes of the October 28th, 2014 Board of Selectmen meeting. Any proposed revisions to that? I
I
have
had
none.
some edits.
Selectman Franco has some,
I have some.
and Selectman Waschinsky has some. I move that we approve the minutes of October 28th, 2014 Board of Selectmen meeting as revised. All in favor, say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. And we also have a set of minutes from the October 20th, 2014 public hearing on the Override Study Committee report.
I had a number of corrections on that one that I given to Kate already.
Excellent.
Yeah, I did.
As to Selectman Waschinsky, all in favor of approving the minutes of the October 20th, 2014 public hearing on the Override Study Committee report as revised, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Next on our miscellaneous calendar is the question of approving a change order. It's change order number 2 in the amount of $100,307 for the Waldstein Playground improvements. And Ms. Galantine? And Ms. Paradis.
I think Erin's going to speak to part of this, and I will speak to the other part. First off, I wanted to address the $54,500 571, change order to include 2 more additional sports lighting on the tennis courts to finish off the tennis court lighting there and the various accoutrement that goes with that, as well as the landscaping and other construction items that would go along with that. That would be BAA trust fund money. And I do want to say that we consider it very, very carefully when suggesting the use of BAA money, and certainly in these projects hope to relieve CIP funding, and these are always once-in-a-lifetime opportunities, and this certainly is one of those times that we would use this money.
Selectman Daley.
I just had one question, because those courts are kind of behind some residential units that face on Beacon Street. And had there been any concern from the neighbors about the amount of light at night that was going to be out their back
They've
doors?
always been lighted courts in the past, but we have not had any issue with that. But I think, Erin, if you have any comments with that.
No, I was just, my comment is just that they were expected to continue to be lit courts throughout our entire process, and we actually didn't have any concerns or complaints
Okay.
about that. I do think that Lisa came to me with the idea that this would really be an opportunity to install the final 2 light stanchions. It'll have less disruption to the public to install them now while the park is closed. Seems like a great idea, and so we did reach out to the contractor to see if we could do that now while they were there. So I certainly think that that'll be a benefit to the tennis program. The remaining piece of the extra work order is funding in the amount of $45,736, and this is to bring the project to full completion. And as you may remember, I came before the Board of Selectmen in July with a change order to address unforeseen conditions below grade at the courts. And we had discovered over 18 inches of asphalt that we needed to bring in specialized equipment to actually remove from the site. And so what we did is we had to clarify the scope, which we did, and also we reduced some of the fence work that was part of the contract, and we did that with internal resources in order to be able to fund that within the existing contract. Now, because of that, we were not able to pulverize and reuse that asphalt, which was going to be a sub-base below some of the courts. And so we needed to bring in additional dense grade crushed stone in order to do that and some additional work on the courts. However, and we didn't know what that quantity was going to be, and so we wanted to make sure we had the full and final quantity before coming back to the board. But what I will say is that that value is actually less than what the original value was for the original PO for the contract. So we're below that value. So we reduced the scope, reduced the quantity, reduced the value of the contract. Now we're coming back to you with an increase, but it's below what the original contract value was.
When's the opening day?
We are going to be open in the spring, and it is looking fantastic. It really is. So we will be able to open in the spring. We'll probably open the playground and the hard court space then. We'll keep our eye on the athletic field and go further into the growing season, see where we are with root growth, and hopefully be able to open the field in the summer. So we'll let you know when the grand opening celebration is, but it's going to be a great one.
So you know that Dean Road Hill is a popular sledding area in the...
We do.
All right.
If by chance we should ever get snow, but of course, who
The
knows?
additional work on tennis posts and nets, why was that necessary?
They're custom, the courts are actually custom in that they are a little bit, we have a little bit less space in between each of the courts. This is how they were beforehand, and we're replacing them actually with a little more space than what was there beforehand. The public opted, instead of having one fewer court and maximizing kind of the space in between the courts, to have 7 courts, and so that just required some movement of posts and custom nets.
I see. Okay, custom nets, they better like those custom nets as tennis players. Any questions or comments from
No.
board members? All right. I move that we approve change order number 2 in the amount of $100,307 to be completed by Quirk Construction Corp. with respect to the Wall Street Playground improvements to be funded from the BAA Trust Fund in the amount of $54,571. That's for the lighting, and in the amount of $45,736 from CIP funding. All those in favor say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next, we have the question of approving an application of Northeast Package Stores, DBA GPS Wine and Liquors, holder of an all-kinds alcoholic beverage license as a package store at 1198 Boylston Street for appointment of Tony Chang as an alternate manager. And I don't see him here, but this is,
We
yeah, we don't
said they
require
didn't
it for
have to
these.
come.
Any question or comment to be made on that? Seeing none, Selectman Daley? All in favor, say aye. Selectman Daley?
Yeah, aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Another all-kinds liquor store item is the question of approving an earlier Sunday morning opening time for the Gora Inc., DBA The Wine Press, at 1024 Beacon Street, per the Alcoholic Beverage Control Commission advisory. And this would allow opening at 10 a.m. on Sundays, and it's pursuant to our recently adopted change in regulations. So, any
This was
question
a-
or comment?
This was included in the economic development bill at the state level, so we don't,
It's really a
it's a state
state
requirement.
requirement,
So this
right.
vote is effectively meaningless. It can happen
Well,
otherwise.
I
we've
think they
been
still have to-
approving them
They have to
in,
come to the
they have
local
to,
licensing
yeah, they have to
authority,
be inspected and approved as a license holder.
The
So-
state allowed us to adopt earlier hours, and,
Yeah.
and now we're,
I'm not sure we have
We don't-
that we have a choice.
Right.
But
Yeah.
it does have to come to the local licensing.
Right.
Well, if, let's put it this way, if they failed a sting or some form of inspection,
Of
we
course.
probably would not approve it at
Of
this
course.
time.
all those in favor of granting in 10 a.m. opening on Sundays for the Wine Press at 1024 Beacon Street, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky? Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Chair votes aye.
And here's the announcement I didn't make.
Yes.
And then, oh yeah, of course. So then we have temporary licenses, which I'll take all together. So the first temporary license is for an all-kinds alcoholic beverage license to Brookline High School 21st Century Fund in connection with their gala on November 15th from 6 p.m. to 12 p.m. at Brookline High School. Second proposed is a alcoholic beverage, temporary alcoholic beverage license to Lars Anderson Auto Museum in connection with a corporate dinner reception on November 18th, 2014, from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. at 15 Newton Street. Next is 4 different temporary licenses, all for Pine Manor College. These would be all alcoholic beverage licenses in connection with weddings to be held at 400 Heath Street on November 22nd from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m., on November 29th from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m., on December 6th from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m., and on December 13th from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. And finally, a temporary license to the teen, for an event to be held at the Teen Center in connection with TEDx Beacon Street Velocity Party to be held on November 15th from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. at 40 Aspinwall Ave. All in favor of those temporary alcoholic beverage licenses, please say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. And that brings us to our regular calendar. First item for consideration is a request for hiring of a new, I believe it's a building custodian at the library, and is Ms. Slyman here? Yes, she is. Hello, Sarah.
Hi, good evening. How are you?
Excellent, thank you.
Sarah Slyman, Library Director. I'm here tonight to ask you to please approve the hiring of a new building custodian, full-time for the main library.
Coincidentally, I believe you were here recently.
I was here last week
Yeah.
asking to approve the posting of a senior, or maybe 2 weeks ago, senior
Yeah.
building custodian. So we successfully promoted from within.
Right.
Good. Any questions, comments about this? Good.
Nope.
My comment to you is please make sure that we seek as diverse a candidate pool as possible, and if necessary, work with our Human Resources Department to make sure we're doing everything possible for that purpose.
I absolutely will.
Thank you. All in favor of, I'm sorry, lost my
Filling the
place here.
vacancy.
Yeah, no.
Authorizing filling a vacancy.
I knew that part. I like to get it according to the calendar.
Glad I'm not
though.
the only one
All in
having
favor of
discovered it.
authorizing the filling of a vacancy in the position of building custodian in the library department, say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Have a nice night.
Now we have the question of appointing 5 new firefighters.
We have the chief's contract.
Oh, I'm
And
sorry.
Maybe
Let's
we
go
could
over
appoint a
chief.
chief, too, while we're at it. Who knows?
So it's the question of reappointing Chief Ford for 3 additional years. And Mr. Kleckner, do you want to introduce it?
Sure. Mr. Chairman and members of the board, Paul Ford was hired 3 years ago, hard to believe, I know, from the city of Fall River as the fire chief, and it was a very unique situation for the town, hiring from the outside, which was a great challenge for both the chief and the department, and I'm pleased to say that I think it's worked out just great on both sides. I think the Chief Ford is very well accepted. He has introduced a lot of innovative training and educational programs for the staff, and I know he's very committed to making sure that our next chief, we don't have to go from the outside, but we can do it from the inside, which was one of my stated goals for him when he started. So anyway, the chief's contract does expire this month, and I enthusiastically recommend reappointment for an additional 3-year term.
Great. Questions, comments, or confrontations for the chief here? Selectman Daley.
No, I just want to say, I think you're doing a great job, and I am very pleased, as Mr. Kleckner said, with the emphasis on getting everybody, additional training, and I think it's great, so keep up the good work.
Thank you.
I concur.
I'll just concur.
Yeah, and I would like just simply to observe that when we knew that there was going to be some adjustment with the new chief coming in, I crossed my fingers and hoped we'd hang on to this one for a while, and it turns out that that was a good idea, because we're glad to see that not only have you finished your first 3 years with high marks, but you're prepared to stick it out another 3 years, which is very reassuring to the rest of us, so we welcome you.
Thank you.
I can't believe 3 years has gone by.
can't either.
One thing I remember from 3 years ago, you were considering maybe moving closer to Brookline, if not to Brookline. Is that that ever going to happen?
Unfortunately, I have an elderly father in the city, and my wife has elderly parents, and other things like that make it a little difficult to move that far.
So how's that commute treating you after 3
No
years?
better than the first day. But I love it here, so it doesn't matter.
Thank you, Chief.
Right answer.
Good answer.
I move that we reappoint Chief Paul Ford for 3 additional years. All in favor, say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Congratulations, Chief.
Thank you very much.
And just stay right where you are, because next we're going to entertain the question of appointing the following candidates as firefighters effective November 17, 2014. I suspect they're in the back of the room. Kenneth Bryan, Robert Padero, Thomas Textera, Anthony Cavallo, and Alex Aruda.
I think it's probably Tahara, but
What's that?
is it Tahara?
No, Texera.
Oh, it is?
Look at that. Once in a while, I do
You
get
did
it
pretty
right.
well on those.
Yeah.
Chief, tell us about our new candidates, please.
Well, as you know, I came before you. It's already been several months. The process takes some time. We had 5 vacancies, had 4 at first, and we ended up with a 5th vacancy. It just so happens that at this point in time, the city of Fall River did have quite a layoff in July, so we have a reemployment list. We got what we consider some fantastic candidates. We're pleased with them coming aboard. Ironically, I did hire them once before, the second time. But we're looking forward to it. I know they are. They're all set. They had their final goal was accomplished today. So they've passed all the muster, their physicals and psychologicals and PAT test, and they're ready to come to work, I think. I think if you would ask them, they're ready to come in. So they're going to, the whole goal is they start on Monday, and while they're already trained firefighters and have been for 3 and 4 years, they're going to go into training for 1 week to go over the things that we do differently here in Brookline and how we operate, the differences, and they'll be ready to go in the companies a week from Monday.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about what we do differently?
Well, we have different nomenclature that's just going to be foreign to them, as it was to me. The different box alarms that we respond to, what we call them, it's like just like a different language. We have a different SCBA unit. Our most valuable piece of equipment in Brookline is more the norm. In Fall River, we had a relatively odd brand and operates completely different, so they're going to need training in that. The different responses we have, we send different companies to different calls, so they're going to have to know that, learn the different companies, our SOPs, our rules and regulations. So that's what training will really be gearing on for them during their week here.
And maybe, Chief, you'll have to tell them what's the best route to drive up here.
And then that all depends on what time of the day. I haven't found the perfect one yet. And you were correct, they are all in the back and anxiously waiting to come to work.
Good. Any questions, comments?
Just glad to see that you were able to hire folks who are already well-trained by you.
Yeah, I just want to say welcome to you guys. We're delighted to have people who are ready to hit the ground running, and I think we think we have an excellent fire department, and I think you'll be pleased here.
Good. Well, without further ado, then, I move that we appoint the following candidates as firefighters effective November 17, 2014. Kenneth Bryan, Robert Padero, Thomas Texera, Anthony Cavallo, and Alex Aruda. All in favor, say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Congratulations, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
You want to shake hands? Come on up here for a second. We'll shake hands. Say hello. All right, we're a little bit ahead of schedule, but not too much.
Oh.
We're on to boards and commission interviews, and I don't think
there's
Matthew
nobody here,
Garvey's
we're in
here. No, I
trouble.
don't think anybody's here. So we'll wait till the first interviewee comes.
Can we skip
Oh,
forward?
should we do that? We don't have,
Can't do your public hearing.
we don't have public hearings on the town meeting articles, so let's do that.
Oh, we can do the appointments.
Yeah, well, why don't we, yeah, let's do appointments first, because then, in case somebody shows up on a warrant article. So,
Mel?
we have appointments for the Arts Commission, the Economic Development Advisory Board, the Naming Committee, the Transportation Board, and the Tree Planting Committee. This is item 13 on our agenda, and I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Kleckner to propose the votes on those.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll start with the Arts Commission. There are one incumbent, Ms. Cohen, and then there is 6 additional vacancies. So I will ask for your vote on reappointment of Evelyn Cohen for a term to 3-year term expiring in 2017.
Aye.
Okay, now for the vacancies, I'll read them out. There are 7 candidates for 6 slots. I'll read them in alphabetical order.
And can you also specify the terms? Because we have 4 in 2016 and 2 in 15. member?
Yes, I'm not sure how I will do that. Let's see.
Well, you
Let me see.
can, you
Okay.
can read out 16, and then we'll
Okay,
see
yes.
about it, and
Good
then,
idea. So there are three terms for, 4 terms for 2016. Peter Ames,
Aye.
Aye.
Amy Emmert,
aye.
Betsy Frontal,
Aye.
Rena Jacobson.
Aye.
I think that's it. And then
Well,
for
wait a
the-
minute,
for the
no.
three. for
I
the-
don't think you had a majority for the first
1,
one.
2, 3, 4. I had, well, I have to go do it again because I thought I.
you
There
had-
were 3.
Okay,
yeah.
I
all
had
right.
3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now for the terms expiring in 2014, Jeremy Kindle,
Aye.
Lauren Wisbecki,
Aye.
and Kate Zavitsakia.
Aye.
Okay. So the way I see it is Ms. Cohen was reappointed for a term expiring in 2017, and Mr. Ames, Ms. Emmert, Ms. Fronthal, and Ms. Jacobson were appointed for the 2016 terms, and Mr. Kindle and Wisbecki were for the
2015.
the 15 terms. Thank you.
Very good.
All right, so now on to the Economic Development Advisory Board. There are three incumbents for reappointment, and I'll read those off.
And also the alternate, I think.
And the alternate is,
He's an incumbent, okay.
yes,
Right.
Mr. Brown you're referring to. Are you referring to?
You're right, they're incumbents, but they're 2 actual committee members and 1 alternate. I don't know if it matters that you make the distinction, but
Right.
No, you're on the wrong board.
I'm looking
On
at,
economic development?
oh, I'm sorry,
Sorry.
wrong list. That's why I'm confused.
Okay, so we have
But I don't have
terms of reappointment. Paul Sainer,
Aye.
Aye.
Derek Choi,
Aye.
Clifford Brown.
Aye.
And now there are 1 vacancy at this time, and I'll read them off in alphabetical order. Carol Levin,
Aye.
Peter Levin, William Ritling. So Ms. Levin will fill the vacant term. Thank you. Now on to the naming committee, and there is an alternate member there. So there are 4, 1, 2,
Total of 3, I think.
3 total that are expiring. Alternate, Harry Friedman.
Aye.
Incumbents, Carla Banca,
Aye.
Fred LeBeau.
Aye.
All those candidates are reappointed. And now on to the Transportation Board. We have two members that are, two members whose term are expiring. Scott Englander.
Aye.
Josh Safer.
Aye.
And now on to the Tree Planting Committee. There is only 1 expiring term. The incumbent is interested, as well as 3 other candidates, so I'll list them first with the incumbent and then to the new candidates. Nadine Gertz,
Aye.
Peter Ames, Elizabeth Erdman, Peggy McGuire. So that, and you know, I will note that the board does have the ability to appoint, I guess, in the bylaws are referred to as alternate members. I think you should probably have a discussion with the chair of the commission, whether that's
We
something.
did get an email from him saying.
Yeah, but I would like to push back a little bit on him,
Yeah.
because I think having people who are available when you can't get, even if they can't be voting members, they can be consulting members, and
And
3
they're-
is
and
a
they're,
very small group.
You know, maybe able to move up then when you.
It would
host.
also, give them an opportunity to,
I was a little
develop.
surprised at the email.
Right.
So maybe one of us could volunteer to tackle that and.
I'll tackle if you would wish,
All right,
so
and,
wish. I will follow up.
We did vote Nadine back in.
Yeah,
so-
we
Right.
voted the incumbent in,
Maybe
but
someone
I
will
will,
touch base.
I'll follow up with
Mr.
Mr. Madison.
Yeah.
Yeah, right, I'll follow up
So
with him.
let's see if we can do something
Yeah.
to accommodate
Right.
those people, but let's do it and not over somebody's objection.
Sure.
All right? So I just had somebody,
We have some
Come
warrant
in.
articles we could go to.
well, I think we might have our first interviewee. Are you here for an interview?
I am, yeah, I'm for the Brookline Conservation Commission.
You're Mr. Garvey?
I am.
Come on right up, we're ready to talk to you. So we'll go back now to agenda item number 10, and it's our interview with Matthew Garvey for the candidate for appointment to the Conservation Commission. Mr. Garvey, would you tell us a bit about yourself and what your interest is in this committee?
Sure. I've been serving on the committee for a few
I'm
years
sorry.
now.
You are an incumbent, I'm sorry.
Yeah. No problem. I wasn't trying to correct you, but I was just, some of my background and then interest. So my background, I'm a compliance officer, so I'm an attorney and work in compliance for the TJX companies. My background, I've been a Brookline resident for probably almost 10 years now. I'm an avid bird watcher, so I do have, through that, kind of a big love and knowledge of sort of the wildlife and general environment around Brookline. So that was probably what originally led me to the committee. And since serving on the committee, I've certainly learned a bit more about kind of water resources and some of the other things that are specifically within our jurisdiction. I've been the vice chair for a little while now, and have had the pleasure of presiding over public meetings and all that stuff. So I've as I've been more in the committee, I think I've gotten a bit more into the process and sort of just kind of getting the public to be able to get questions to applicants, get applicants to be able to sort of answer questions that we have on behalf of the town. And, I've kind of been able to, I guess, really just get a bit more acquainted with a lot of the nooks and crannies of Brookline. And I would hope to be able to serve the town even further on the commission.
Thank you. Questions from Mr. Garvey?
Well, I loved the way you put on your application that you asked probing questions. not just
I try to.
The question I had for you is, now have you, in your bird watching or in your role as a conservation commissioner, gotten familiar with the horse sanctuary?
Yeah, certainly. My
Any
kids go to
endangered species
one of my
or
kids goes to the
anything there?
Baker School, so I
Yeah.
go there. Yeah, so it's actually been something that I've been chatting with a bit. Just some others in the community. There is a bird that uses that horse sanctuary called a rusty blackbird, which is actually one that it's not on an endangered species list, but it's one that Cornell University is organizing a lot of studies for. It's had this like tremendously precipitous decline. And there have been a lot of sightings, including by me and others, at the horse sanctuary. So it is something that we'd use probably more in migration, spring and fall migration. But even this is a bird called the rusty blackbird. They breed in kind of northern woods, so they probably wouldn't breed in the horse sanctuary. They're more in mountains or even further north. Winter in kind of wet swamps, like red maple swamps.
So
And,
my question is, though, would blasting of pudding stone and major construction nearby have a negative impact on?
I see now where this is going on that. I mean, I don't, I don't know that I could weigh in on the exact impact on that, but I mean, I do know that a bird of special concern and interest uses the horse sanctuary. So certainly anything that impacts its ability to function as essentially a wet woods, it has significant wetland properties, but it's a wooded area, and that's essentially the habitat of this rusty blackbird. So, certainly, and that's something that, the commission has taken a close look at is, any impacts on the wetland resource within the sanctuary, from any proposals around that we've seen.
Is there documentation coming from Cornell, for example, about the risks to this particular species?
That is, in part what is known is that through many measures, the decline is pretty dramatic. I've seen numbers ranging from like 50% to 95%.
Wow,
over.
that is
So,
dramatic.
and I'm, so the, essentially, just kind of understanding where it is still being found, since it's being found in a lot fewer
Right,
places than
right.
it was, is essentially one of the kind of the first steps. And, I would say certainly preserving those places where it is still found.
Could you give us the name again? Just
Of the bird, it's called a rusty blackbird.
rusty,
as
not
in,
rustic, but rusty.
Rusty,
Rusty red.
It goes from black to having a sort of, reddish brown color. Hence the
So what's
rusty.
the process by which a species such as this would be determined to be endangered?
So both Massachusetts, the state, and the federal government have different but similar processes. I mean, there are sort of petitions by scientific groups and kind of the whole, there are public hearings, and it's a public process to essentially, because it is a pretty big deal to list something on an endangered species. So this is one, I don't believe there is currently a proposal to add it to either the Massachusetts or the federal ones, but those are, historically generally a little bit behind. I mean, just there's so much process to getting things on those lists that, and I mean, it's obviously a valuable public service to have some process.
Mass Audubon keeps a list, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Of what they
so-
consider to be at risk?
Yeah, that's actually a good question. I know one of the issues is, well, it must breed in the western part. So Mass Audubon recently did a second survey of kind of all the breeding birds, and that included species of special concern. Another one, which, in fact, the only nest in this current cycle was actually found to be in Brookline. I'd love to talk about this
really?
in a moment if you
Sure.
want to hear about it.
No, let's-
But don't
but
tell
there-
us where it is, if it's endangered.
Well, it was interesting. I happened to see it, but anyway, so I'm pretty sure that the rusty blackbird would have been noted in that Massachusetts bird. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife also does a similar thing, where they have an annual State of the Birds that uses actually the Cornell data, that the same one I was talking about, and I'm almost positive that rusty blackbirds would have been mentioned in both of those as species of special concern, or something quite short of being on the endangered species list, but something that scientists are
As
actively monitoring.
Brookline is one of the, I guess you could say, the home of the founders of the Mass Audubon Society, I would hope that we would be able to talk to somebody there about any birds at risk, but in particular those that might be endangered by activities that could be disruptive around the horse sanctuary.
Yeah, no, I think so, and I'd be happy to help implement that. I mean, I did for the other species, it was actually through contacts at Mass Audubon and New Hampshire Audubon that I was able to learn of this one nest. So I was for Mass Audubon they were doing the survey of breeding birds, and they kind of cut the state into a bunch of blocks. So I had a responsibility for one of the blocks that was in Brookline, and one of my goals, because I could hear these birds at night during June, so it was clearly around. It's a common nighthawk. I don't know if you're familiar with these at all, but they have this kind of loud booming call at night. I mean, they were very pretty neat birds. They come out at dusk pretty much. And the nest was probably within view of this building. It was just off of Washington Street. But they essentially nest on rooftops, and especially roofs that have like those small little pebbles, which have kind of gone out of fashion. So they historically had been in a bunch of urban cities. So about the only place that they are in Massachusetts in the past like 50 years has been in urban areas. So Worcester, Boston, Brookline. Those have declined. They don't exactly know why. It's probably some combination of fewer roofs.
I was going to say fewer pebbles on the roof.
Yeah, so some combination of fewer pebbles on the roofs, and I think just generally insects have really declined with better pesticides. And
right.
I mean, essentially, these birds eat high-flying insects. That's their food. So flying ants, mosquitoes, anything that's essentially flying at night. You'll see them sometimes at Fenway Park because they get attracted to the lights and, will feed down things there. But the one nest, so Massachusetts had no nest within the 5-year period, but shortly thereafter, somebody went and Googled, it was actually New Hampshire Audubon because they were doing a study of these nighthawks. Somebody Googled them, and it turns out they were in Brookline, and the New Hampshire Audubon person got in touch with me. They built a nest on a rooftop, but it was on a bag of charcoal that was kind of left out on their rooftop, was where the eggs were laid. They just lay them out in the open.
It's a good thing the fire chief just left.
But anyway, so that was the only nest confirmed in the past, whatever it was, 6 years of, people actively looking into this in Massachusetts.
It sounds like they're pretty resourceful birds.
They are. To be able
in
to nest
some
on
ways.
charcoal, you'd think that they'd have more habitat, but
Yeah.
Well, I'll note that the Rusty Blackbird has their own website, the rustyblackbird.org.
Oh, I didn't even know that. Wow. So, yeah.
You mentioned,
Well, I urge you to think about coming on Wednesday to the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Yeah.
And mentioning the blasting concerns nearby.
Yeah, I
for
mean,
this
one issue
particular
I don't,
bird.
it would be hard, I haven't really, it's certainly a species of concern. I would say the issue really would be if something were to impact the wetlands so that it wasn't functioning as it is, or, obviously destroy the habitat. I mean, that would certainly be something of concern to note.
Well, but they're planning, the current plans would involve major blasting right next door.
Yeah.
And I have heard from some of the neighbors, certainly a concern, I don't know if it's valid or not, about that they were saying when that there's a pretty high water table generally in the area, and, if you're blasting in the pudding stone, it may affect water runoff in neighboring areas.
Yeah, so I don't know if you've seen, but I mean, the commission has certainly had some letters, in various plans. I don't mean to be speaking on something I'm not informed of. I hadn't heard a connection between the blasting and the potential water, but, certainly happy to look into that, and obviously, would be something that we'd be concerned about.
I wanted to ask you about wetlands in general in town. Is there a sense that our wetlands are wetter or drier in recent years? I've heard concerns that there's not enough wetlands and that our wetlands are now wetter than they should be, what with global warming and increased rainfall and not enough drainage areas. And then I've heard the opposite from time to time, too.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, in terms of difference, I guess I haven't been quite in town or on the commission enough to know exactly, how things may have historically changed over time. But certainly as a town, relative to some areas of Massachusetts, we don't have quite as many wetlands. We have a lot of, we have sort of streams and then kind of wetlands related to those, and several vernal pools and several wet areas that are sanctuaries. In terms of changes from global, I mean, I guess the way I look at it is that's almost one of the many reasons you'd protect a wetland is that they sort of, if you will, help the environment kind of absorb, whether it's, moisture, extra rainfall and all that sort of thing. I mean, that's exactly how those, have over long periods of times have basically functioned to help with flood control and all that sort of thing. So, certainly, water levels are things that fluctuate pretty greatly over time. Well, I guess everybody's kind of on edge as to how much it will in a kind of an unknown era of more rapid climate change. So certainly is the possibility, I guess, for more increased rainfall, more floods, more dramatically large storms. At least I think some of the models are predicting that. So that's, I just think, all the more important reason to have wetlands areas that could, absorb temporary large increases in water. The same thing, I mean, I know one of the things the commission is trying to be more proactive in terms of at least looking into or proposing or, ways of whether it's through their programs in New York, for instance, where doing a lot of kind of rain gardening on, roadsides to basically try to just have many more places in addition to natural wetlands that absorb water or help route water into areas that it actually, instead of going into our sewer systems and leading to kind of big overflows of the rivers, essentially capturing the water, but capturing it in sort of a positive way, whether it's a garden or, some sort of resource that, kind of keeps the water in areas of, where the kind of natural systems can absorb the water, slowly over time.
Good, thank you.
So-
Other questions, anyone? Well, thank you very much for your expertise and your devotion to the town and for coming here tonight to help us get reacquainted with you.
Great, yeah, my
So,
pleasure.
We're not going to make an appointment tonight, but you'll be hearing from us very soon.
All right, I really appreciate it. Thanks so
Thank
much.
you.
Take care.
Our next candidate is a candidate for appointment to the Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Relations Commission. I know Mr. Miles is here. Brian?
I was trying to work it out for these guys. They didn't have to come back for interviews, but it
No,
seems like
no.
the bureaucracy was more tenacious than me because he kept getting put back on for interviews, even though we just
Yeah.
talked with him.
Well, I know, we just talked to you, Mr. Miles.
short time ago.
Appreciate you coming back again, but we, in the interest of fairness and transparency, we thought it best if everybody at least goes through the same process. And tell us about why you want to serve in this capacity, please.
What I said in my initial interview, last year, holds true. You want to see change. And where we are now, we're in 2014. The tactics, the perspectives, the way people did things back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, no longer appropriate. We've evolved way beyond that. Coming on to the one to make change, and Brookline has been a great place. I've lived here for 34 years. Put all our kids through the Brookline school system. And we've experienced difficulties along the way and have dealt with it. But also, my background is such that as an advocate, I've been an advocate for Indians, tribes, people, community people. And I've had to come up against state, local, bureaucracies, federal bureaucracies, and the unfair and unequal treatment of Indians. When we look at diversity here in this town, what we see here is great town, and the complaint was that not enough people, diverse people being employed with that was one of the issues. I see it as a broader, and when I go through Brookline, and now one statistic I became aware of was that 17% of the population here in Brookline is now Asian. And we had no Asians who were actually members of the commission. We had one who was from the school committee. And I think that's, and I spoke to a couple of people on the day of the election. And so I asked them, I said, would you be interested in doing that? Because broadening in terms of, adhering to and working under the umbrella of diversity. And they said they would both be interested. So I gave them, I didn't want to pressure them, so I gave them my email address and whatnot. I haven't heard from them. I said, get a hold of, and I said, get a hold of folks. And I said, Nancy was looking for, actively looking for people. And I said, we need some, and I asked them what were some of their core issues. What were some, because I said we would like somebody who had to basically have fingers on the pulse of issues. And they said both jobs. They both had applied for jobs. One had retired or was older, and said it was an age thing. And the other one, they both without even saying anything, they both reacted at the same time. Oh, you can't get hired on in Brookline. I thought that was interesting. I only spoke to two, and both of them said that. And so, but I also look at change today as where it's win-win. This past year, we haven't accomplished anything on the commission. There's been a lot of internecine warfare, people have resigned. It's the whole trust issue with the selectmen inside the commission. And the commission needs to accomplish some good things. So we need to do that win-win. We need to develop the trust both ways in terms of not only the selectmen and other people within the town, but also internally within the commission. So I'm looking for some kind of, and I think one of the issues that we need to look at on the commission, and that is the issue of focus. We need some kind of rule of order because people just want to bring up and do whatever, and they've used the chair, and this isn't the first time, from what I understand, in past commissions, the chair has been used to vent their own agendas. Don't want to see that. Want to see, and what I the offer is one that I'm going to bring up with the commission, is that we operate through Robert's rules, that we set time limits and we adhere to those, that we get things done. The commission can't afford to go through another year of not doing anything. I'm not going to, and I've got, as well as everybody, other folks have lives, and we've got a lot of things to do. And the last thing we need to do is be wasting our time not doing and not accomplishing anything. Came here to make some, I said that in my first interview. I want to make some things, good things happen. And I want to make it within the confines of the town of Brookline. Not into no's and no's. And if I have a problem, I'll talk to you directly. I'm not going to get in front of the press. I'm not going to turn around and make all kinds of goofy statements and do all these drama kinds of things. I think we can turn around and we can iron out. We have difficulties, we have issues. I think we can do them in a very professional, in an amicable way. And I think we need to build that trust. So that's where I'm coming from. And I think the other thing that we need to do in terms of the commission, so that we're not going on, because everybody wants to use the commission for all kinds of things. And I'm saying, stay within the confines, the parameters of the article. That's it. Not all over the place. I don't want to deal with issues in South Africa. It's not that they're not important. It's not that we can do anything about it. We have issues here in Brookline, and I believe we take care of our own first. We can talk about the world, but we need to turn around and deal with it. It doesn't mean that we're in isolation. It means that where are our priorities? Why are we here on the commission? What is the purpose of the commission? And so I'm looking to see, maybe we can turn around and encourage the commission to go through, short and long range planning so that we can focus. I mean, people want to become the chair. That can become a political thing. I mean, everybody wants to, they maybe want to put it on their resume. I don't care. What I do care about is that we get something done, that we get things done that are priorities, and we establish and come together as a group in setting those priorities. Because that's what's going to give us, and that's going to help heal that commission. It's also going to help establish a positive relationship with the administration here and also with the Board of Selectmen. Those are the things that I'm looking to see. And so when I came here, that's when, I've learned, one thing I've learned is, we need to do certain things, not micromanage. And we don't need to turn around and try to pick hairs at every little thing that comes about. I mean, folks they can cite the law, they can cite when there's an aberration, you've done something. And even when it came to appointing or selecting the director, I looked at that and I saw all the emails back and forth. That to me was garbage, excuse the expression. The intent was honorable. That's how I looked at it. Maybe in earnest to get things done, the T's weren't crossed and the I's weren't dotted, all of them. I can understand, so instead of being negative and coming at this, what can we do to don't come with, like I told my son before he was doing a co-op at Toyota. I said, son, I said, when you go there, don't go there and tell them when you get on the job, don't go there with problems, come with solutions. Nobody wants to hear about just problems. They want to hear about solutions. What can you do to make it better? And I think that's the focus of the commission. If we got an issue, then we need to don't just raise it as an issue. So what can we do to make it better? And so I'm looking for not only myself, but other commissioners to do that. Okay, I'm not looking for, the last thing I want, is to go through what we went through before. Because you're going to lose more, people are going to drop off, and I'm not going to be around for a lot of silly nonsense. I take my role here, I take it very seriously. There are things we can do, and we're not going to do everything. We're not going to accomplish and do everything overnight. Well, there are things that we can do, and let's start with the things that we can win on. Everybody can walk away and say, geez, we accomplished something, we all feel good about it, and not a win-lose. Win-lose just creates a trench, somebody to start digging the trench for the next battle. We had enough battles, no more. I can understand a healthy argument, I can appreciate it. But what I can't appreciate is the people's personal agendas, and that we're not moving ahead. Now, having gone through all that, I just want to give you a sense of where I'm coming from and why I'm on the commission and why I want to be on the commission. And
Thank you very much. Selectman Daley.
I just want to say I'm delighted, Brian, that you're willing to reapply.
thank you.
And I want to say, I know it's an inconvenience to come here twice, but hearing you speak and redirect us and highlight the issues for us is actually very valuable, not just in terms of making our appointment, but in refocusing us as a board.
So that's why I came here, because I initially said, okay, I've got a lot of things to do. I'm trying to get my mom here, and so I'm going through a lot.
Anybody else?
Given what you've said, I not only think we are very fortunate that you're willing to come back or be reappointed, but I do hope that you will be successful in conveying those thoughts to your colleagues when the new group is organized.
Oh, I will convey them.
I'm sure you will.
I will convey them. And like I said, there are good people on the commission. I think when you turn around, that's why I said, I think part of it would be training, going through, even having training in Robert's rules and training, and part of that training would be using the commission, in the bylaws and establishing direction for the commission, so that when we do something, we're within that focus, okay? We're not out here someplace, and then we come together as a group. So that's the message, and it's going to be consistent. I'm going to raise those issues.
Good.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And Anthony Nero? Didn't see him here.
Kay Vanderzeel is.
Kay is
No.
here.
Yeah, no, I see Cornelia Vanderzeel. Also applicant for the Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Relations Commission. Hi, Cornelia, nice to see you.
Yeah, Cornelia Vanderzeel, also known as Kea, 100 Walcott Road. That's a Dutch nickname for Cornelia, Kea. So. Anyway, why am I interested in doing this? It's really hard to follow Brian, I must say, because I really agree with him, and from the work I've done as being a physician and being in charge of the Quality Assurance Committee in both at Kaiser when I was out there, and then being involved in the Quality Assurance Committee at Harvard Vanguard for my department, which was OBGYN. I mean, I think I have a lot of those skills. I was also the chair of the Concerns Committee. Concerns are complaints, really. I mean, occasionally you'd get something that was positive about what you were doing, and then, of course, you had the joy of passing that on. But I really agree with what Brian says. I don't know what to add to him. I think the few of the meetings I've been to where there hasn't been a quorum, it's taken something like an hour sometimes to figure out that they really couldn't meet. And I don't want to be part of a committee that does that, and I think we need more people like Brian, and I'm hoping that I could be like him to help move this committee forward to do the things we can do. I just reviewed this afternoon the bylaw as it was rewritten. There's a lot that has to be done. So clearly we have to prioritize things. We have to organize ourselves. We can't be spinning our wheels week after week. I think we also, as I said at the interview that I had before, we need to get out in the community as this committee, because we can't just be meeting and hoping that people will come to us. We have to also, at some point, figure out, after we've organized ourselves, figure out some way that we can get into the community and talk to people and let them know we're there and that we're there for them. Because there are things that have to happen here in Brookline. I mean, I've lived here 30 years. 4 of my kids have gone through the Brookline schools. And I'm very grateful for that. And I feel like now that I'm retired, I need to give back to the community. And I'm hoping that I can do a decent job here in a commission like this.
Good. Thank you very much. Anyone have questions
I
for committee?
actually don't have a question necessarily, but I will say that one thing Brian mentioned that really struck me was his thinking about recruiting additional possible candidates, because the truth is, I think we have a shorter list than we need. Isn't that right?
That is true. We
We
do not.
could
yes.
use some more folks
The
who'd
odds
be
are
willing.
good for you because we do not yet have enough candidates
Right.
for all the slots. So we are, and please spread the word,
Right.
both of you, that we are still looking for some candidates and you know, love
Yeah,
to have a couple
I would like
more.
to see that too. I feel a
We
little.
should have enough for a quorum, though, I want to reassure you.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be that bad.
Well,
but,
I mean, but not everybody can make every single meeting, but I feel a little odd applying for this commission. I don't feel that I represent some of the diversity that we should be having on this commission, so I'm hoping that we can find people from different groups within the town who would be willing to join this commission as well, so that we have a diversity of opinion. I mean, I have some experience as a woman going to medical school in the 60s, 70s, that may be helpful, but when we were still under very quotas of like 9% in medical school, and as an immigrant and that sort of thing. But otherwise, I don't represent, I think, the entirety of the town. I represent one section of it.
Very good. Anything further? Well, thank you, Dr. Van der Zeel. Appreciate your time, and, we'll be making our appointments as soon as possible. Good. And Mr. Nero is still not here, so we got about 5 minutes. I don't want to start
running
our
out of things
next
to do.
item early because it is a public hearing, so
Yeah, all right.
do we want to take
I
up...
think we actually can start it as long as we continue after the
No,
time.
I don't want to risk it, so
Okay.
let's, you want to take up warrant Article 10? I know Selectman Waschinsky had some revisions on that.
Yeah. Mr. Christ had made a suggestion, which kind of hit me as pretty good, which Commissioner Sturgeon actually is on board, I'm told. So it's on page 14-1. And it's accepting the petitioner's proposal in the warrant article with the addition in the rules and regulations section in the middle. There's a new sentence which unfortunately, when it was emailed, isn't highlighted. And it starts with, regulations may also include temporary waiver provisions. And then Selectman Goldstein suggested adding, or provisions for permanent waiver for cause. That piece I'm not necessarily on board with, and I'd be interested in Selectman Goldstein's reasons for adding that.
Well, I think what we heard that when we discussed this earlier was the possibility that there may be some businesses that, for whatever reason, just can't do this. They don't have the the storage space for an additional recycling bin, or they don't have their program doesn't include enough quantity to make it feasible. I think we ought to, at least have the possibility that some particular business might have just cause for being exempt from this.
We don't.
I don't know,
it's-
I find it awkward, because I think that's likely to create hard feelings. I'm definitely in favor of being able to grant temporary waiver provisions, but, and there may be something that you work it out with your neighbor, so you recycle together, or something like that.
We don't grant any permanent waivers on the residential side.
And I don't believe in the plastic bag
No.
waiver, or waiver bylaw, we grant permanent waivers.
Yeah, there was provision for temporary in there.
But not
Right.
permanent.
Yeah, and the provision here for temporary waivers is wide open, so these temporary waivers can be,
Okay.
it's very broadly
All right.
construed.
I thought a little bit of flexibility might be something we think about, but you've convinced me otherwise.
I understand the concern you're raising, but I also think that if we are mandating it, I wanted waivers because I know there are always unusual circumstances, and sometimes people just need more time to get things set up in order to be compliant. I'm very much in favor of temporary waivers, but I worry about giving somebody an exemption.
Yeah, so I think that sentence should say, the regulations may also include temporary waiver provisions for cause, because that.
Yeah, that's fine.
There should be
Yeah.
a reason they get the
Sure,
temporary.
there should be a reason.
So
And
you-
I think we tried to lay that out in our plastic bag bylaw. What we did was and that's part of why I had some mixed feelings about going ahead with this warrant article. I'm not generally in favor of writing regulations into a bylaw, but if we didn't put in provision like this, then they might not become part of the regulations. So, and we have to authorize those. So it seems to me the waiver is a significant, it's a significant authority to provide. And then presumably the DPW can come up with whatever they need to do in order to actually have people participate and be compliant. I have no problem with the rest of it. Not clear they would have felt they had the authority to do waivers without it being in the bylaw.
Right.
2 points. One, I just want to remind everybody that the advisory committee is going to have taken a different vote than we will.
Yeah.
They're going to recommend, or they have recommended,
Well,
that
they
this go to a selectmen's committee.
Well, sometimes it's good when we face off.
I have no problem thumbing my
s-
nose at my former colleagues on this.
Well, I had the sense that they would perhaps reconsider
Right.
this, if this language were available to them, they might reconsider too. So
Yeah, I
there's that.
spoke with Chairman Bors, and I
Yeah.
believe he's going to be putting this on their agenda for
I
reconsideration.
see that our Commissioner Papasturgeon is recommending that the DPW should be charged by us with drafting
Yeah.
That doesn't have to
That
be
doesn't have to
included in
be in
there.
the-
Obviously,
yeah.
we would ask them for.
So that should be part of
input.
our
Yeah.
explanation.
Right.
And I just want to seek clarification here. It seems to me there's passing reference to an implementation date of November 2015. Is that our understanding that we're?
Yeah, my understanding, at least according to this note, was that Commissioner Papasturgeon says he's amenable to the November 2015.
And
So-
there was an additional correspondence that isn't here, where
Oh.
Commissioner Papasturgeon said explicitly he's okay with this.
Right. I think November 2015 is fine. I wouldn't want to see it slip beyond a year from now.
Well, I think that's fine, because I think most people can be up and running by then. If there's a few problems, they can get one of these temporary waivers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think the only thing I will note that I believe, if my aging memory is correct, that in the, I think in the plastic bag one, we specified that those temporary waivers could only be 6 months or something like
I
that.
think it
Right.
was 6
So
months
this
of
is-
renewable, though.
Oh, okay, so if we just say,
This is broad, yeah,
Yeah.
this
This is
is
broader.
broader.
okay, all right.
Okay,
And you know, if November 15 becomes problematic and it has to slip to December or January, he might have authority under this provision to grant a waiver to that.
right.
Well, certainly the town can decide.
Right.
Even if the regulation goes into effect, that we're not going to
Force,
enforce for
yeah.
a month or two, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm going to move that this board recommend favorable action on warrant Article 10 in the language appearing in page 14-1 of our package, with the revision that the sentence that reads, "Regulations may also include temporary waiver provisions or
For
provisions
cause.
for permanent waiver for cause," be revised to, "Regulations may also include temporary waiver provisions for cause." Kate, you follow that? Good. All those in favor, say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Good.
I'll just note that Ms. Kleckner, just run this by the moderator, I don't think there'll be a problem.
Right.
By the way, if somebody sees Mr. Chris come in and I don't notice him, and if
Right.
he's here to discuss this, I'd appreciate it if somebody could go whisper in his ear or ask Mr. Kleckner to whisper in his ear and let him know not to sit here for the next 2 hours.
I
Good.
think Anthony Narrows here.
Is Mr. Narrow here?
Mr.
Oh, you
Narrow,
are here
yeah.
now. Okay, okay, come on forward. We're going to be a little quick with you, though. Good evening. Mr. Narrow, I should announce, is a candidate for appointment to the Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Relations Commission. And why don't you tell us quickly about why you'd like to serve on the commission?
Well, I would like to serve on the commission because I was excited to have a positive, have an opportunity to have a positive impact on my community, on an issue I care very much about. And I was proud to be part of the commission last time around. And, you know, there wasn't much I got done, but I think that there was a lot of, you know, productive conversations that will motivate us to be productive moving forward. You know, I think the biggest key to success here is going to be to have a commission with people who are united, not necessarily in point of view, but in the goal of moving forward and taking that bylaw and doing the most we can with it. And, you know, I have that desire for progress, and I hope I can be a member of the commission and contribute to moving forward.
I know you're all in favor of progress. Are you also a process person, and specifically, how familiar are you with the Roberts rules?
Not very, but I am a stickler for rules when they apply. You know, one of the great parts of being on the commission was having Ernest Fry, who was just an encyclopedia in terms of rules. I think that, I mean, I say that as a compliment. I mean, I really appreciated, you know, his commitment to that. You know, I think that what I recognize, this was the first time I've ever volunteered or participated in government before, and one of the things I did recognize were, you know, to get the meetings done, to have motions heard, to have votes called. I mean, that's fairly straightforward stuff. And I think that if we can have a strong leader who will commit us to doing that, and, you know, I think there are some people in the commission that will be able to fill that role as chair, then I'll learn the rules as need be.
Very good. Any questions for Mr. Nara?
I just noticed that you work out of state, and this is a commission that's had some trouble keeping a quorum. I want to make sure that you're going to be able to get to the meetings and not negatively impact your professional life.
No, that is a fair question, or family life for that matter. No, I live right down the street, so I enjoy walking to the meetings. I have, if you look at my attendance record for the meetings, the only meetings that I missed was when unfortunately some folks left the commission, and then we lost quorum. So I think I probably missed 2 meetings in total. So I was always able to meet and put in the hours. And I also did try to go to, you know, ancillary meetings that were related to what we were doing as well. So I don't, if I couldn't make the meetings, I wouldn't be up here because I don't want to take away from people. So.
Very good. Any questions Thank you very much.
Okay.
Appreciate your
Thank you. Sorry I
interest
was
in it.
late.
We'll
Yeah.
make, no problem. We'll make an appointment in just a few short weeks.
Just note as you depart, we do not actually have candidates for all of the slots that are available. So one thing I'm suggesting to candidates as they come forward is that if you know somebody that you feel might be particularly well-suited, by all means, feel free to recruit.
Go out there, beat the bushes. I will. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
And I think it's worth noting for people in the audience, in the room who may be interested in applying, or the viewing public who obviously is interested in town affairs by virtue of the fact they're spending their Monday night watching us.
Right.
Their application is encouraged as well.
Right.
Very good. Next is agenda item number 11. This is a request for a noise bylaw waiver. We have a public hearing on it. The request is by the Boston Lyric Opera for a waiver in connection with performances to take place at Temple Ohabai Shalom on November 20th, 22nd, 23rd, and for setup on November 11th through the 17th. Is the applicant here? I see them coming forward, so I guess they are. Very good. Good evening.
Good
Would
evening,
you,
Mr. Chairman, Board of Selectmen, Mr. Kleckner. Thank you for hearing us tonight. I am Brad Vernatter. I'm the Director of Production with Boston Lyric Opera. I have with me here Catherine Truman from Catherine Truman Architects, Carl Rosenberg from Ascene Tech, our acoustic engineer, and Andy Eisenberg, our legal counsel and board member for Boston Lyric Opera.
Very good.
We are here this evening because we are producing a site-specific opera at the Temple Ohabai Shalom. We are very excited to have the opportunity to be working with the temple to produce this work. It's a project, we do one project like this each season, and this is our first time in Brookline, and we're very excited to be here this year. The project is taking place in the sanctuary of the temple, and we are bringing in a lot of theatrical equipment, including some lighting and communication systems, theatrical electrical equipment that is not provided in the sanctuary. And this is to adapt the space so it is able to be a performance space for the opera. To power this equipment, we are required to bring in a generator because the infrastructure of the temple cannot accommodate, the capacity for that cannot accommodate the equipment that we have in there, that we're bringing in there. So we are bringing in a generator and working very closely with the town administrators, with Kara Bruton, and the heads of department for the building department and the fire department. We have been working to make sure that we are in compliance with all of the bylaws and the ordinances for the town of Brookline, and to ensure that we have a safe and a smooth process as we put together this project and have our performance. In discussion with some of the administrators, we were advised to seek a waiver for our generator. We are looking to run the generator until 11 p.m. on some of the select days that were provided in the letter. And we have been advised to select a waiver for those days. And with that, we are here.
Can I just make a comment?
Go ahead,
I know
Selectman.
that some of the people who got in touch with us about this, as a result of your request for a waiver, we notify abutters. And abutters said, why are we, the selectmen, hearing this question, this request, on Monday when you proposed to actually be up and running on Friday or Thursday, I've forgotten which. And I just want to make it clear that we knew that the application had been reviewed by our staff, and we also did not meet for 2 weeks, or we skipped a week, I guess is what I'm trying to say, which meant that in order for us to schedule this public hearing, we were forced, you could argue by circumstance, to make it appear to those people who didn't understand why we did this, that somehow there was insufficient notice, and that it was not the intent. We did not plan this in order for there not to be time for people to understand what was going on. So I'm just making that sort of as a disclosure, because I do know that some people asked that question. Your application was timely. Our ability to schedule the hearing is not what we would normally do.
Okay.
Yes, if I would like to invite Carl up, who is our acoustic engineer, to explain more about the generator and the
Right.
noise level that are the abutters and that the residents will be hearing.
Can I just ask before we get to that?
Sure.
So how many performance are there actually going to be?
There are 4 performances. We open on November 19th.
So we have 10 dates down here on your request. So there are 6 days of rehearsal and 4 days of performance, is that it?
Yes.
And I noticed you said you were planning on running the generator starting at 7 a.m.? Do you guys really rehearse at 7 a.m.?
We work long hours
Okay.
in the theater world, yeah. So 7 a.m. until 11.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just noticed in our calendar, we talk about 3 days of performance, 20th, 22nd, 23rd.
And for setup, it says.
Yeah, but he just said 4 performances.
Well, but the waiver actually covers all of those dates.
So the waiver, the dates that I detailed in the letter were for the dates that we were planning to run the generator until 11 p.m. So we have a performance on the 19th, the 20th, and the 22nd, which are
Okay.
evening performances.
Okay.
And we also have a performance on the 23rd,
I see.
which
You
is a
wouldn't-
matinee performance.
So you wouldn't need a waiver for that. I
Correct.
get it. Okay, thank you. Yeah, let's hear from your engineer, because I'm interested in the level of noise that we can expect from this.
So I'm Carl Rosenberg. I'm with Acentech. We're an acoustics consulting firm in Cambridge. I might also be applying for the diversity committee someday. But until then, we'll see if we get away. So I did a couple things to prepare for this. One thing I did was to measure with my handheld sound level meter the background sound level at the site along Martha Street. And it's just exactly as what one would expect based on the noise ordinance that publishes typical levels for urban and suburban environments. So it's about 50 or 55 decibels at night, probably quite a bit louder during the day due to traffic on Beacon Street. The generator that has been selected is particularly quiet, as generators go, and it's been referenced by the manufacturer, tested to generate, when measured 23 feet away, 63 decibels. Just numbers, but just for reference, 63 decibels at 23 feet. So we looked at what that implied in terms of the noise to the neighbors at the property line, and there are 2 additional factors that will reduce that level beyond or below that 63 decibels. The first is that none of the neighbors is as close as 23 feet. In fact, one house is across the street is 124 feet. Another house is 140 feet, and there's one house behind the generator that's about 60 feet away. For each time you double the distance from a point noise source, the sound level goes down by 6 decibels. So due to nothing more than just the distance from the generator with those ratings, I expect that the sound level at those houses will be anywhere from 15 to 30 decibels less than what would it be at 23 feet. In addition, I've recommended to the Boston Lyric Opera that in order to be sure that there's no concerns and that we are getting ahead of the problem, if it is a problem, the opera is planning to put up a 3-sided enclosure, 6 or 8 feet high, of a solid, dense, impervious material that will interrupt the line of sight between any and all neighbors and the generator itself. My estimate is that that barrier will reduce the sound level above and beyond the noise reduction for distance by another 10 decibels. So we're introducing distance and the barrier effect, which will reduce the sound level to the neighbors. Based on this, I'm confident that the sound level will be well within the noise ordinance that covers these issues, and maybe not even need a waiver. So we're in good shape for the noise levels.
What kind of surface does it sit on?
It's on a plywood base on a embankment.
And is there some kind of baffling so that you're not hearing the machine rattling? Apart from the engine noise, I imagine you can hear noise from the machine's vibrations against the structure that it's on.
I can only say that this measurement and the description of the machine, which I can share with you, describes a sound enclosure that's baffled and damped, as well as mufflers on the discharge and it's designed to eliminate that kind of problem.
Okay.
Physically on the premises, where will it be situated?
From the parking lot, if you're at the temple looking towards the parking lot, it's immediately to your left.
Selectman Franco?
Is your handheld meter the American standard or the European standard?
ANSI standard type 2. It's not a fancy meter, but it does give us decibels. It's more than you get with your app, your iPhone app.
It's not an IEC 616272-1.
-2.
You can see we know a few things about
Well,
sound.
in all fairness, I did not make an extensive sound level reading over, 2 or 3 days, which we would do for some kind of situations, but I do have a feeling of what the sound level is there. It's a quiet area. I'm not suggesting it's noisy, but we're within the expectations.
Well, I'm looking at an aerial view, and from at least the visual, in addition to your proposed baffle, it seems to me that it would be physically situated as far as reasonably possible from any residential abutter. I
Yes,
mean,
ma'am.
that's what the description
Yes.
you've given me says.
That's right.
Okay.
Good. Any questions from board members? So it's a public hearing. Is there anyone, member of the public here to be heard on this matter? Ms. Stringham.
Thank you. I'm Jean Stringham, Precinct 3 Town Meeting Member, and I hope you received the letter that I sent to Patty Parks on Friday. I am, along with my husband Peter Stringham, a subscriber to the Boston Lyric Opera, as well as our friend Peg Centuria, who's also here to support this. So as my letter indicated, we are just thrilled that they're coming to Brookline. We attended a opera 2 years ago at the Kennedy Museum Library in Boston, at the Castle, and now it's right in our neighborhood, and we're so happy. The level of beauty of the operas is tremendous. It's a wonderful asset for Brookline for them to be coming. So I hope you'll support this request. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here to be heard on this?
I'm
Nobody.
going to say that it seems like they have done everything they possibly could, and they've worked with our town departments to make sure that this is done as reasonably as possible, and I think it is kind of exciting to have them coming to Brookline, so
Good.
I'm willing to move favorable action on their request.
Excellent. Everyone have anything further to say before we put that motion to the test?
Go for it.
All right, so the motion is to approve the request for a notice, for a bylaw, for a noise bylaw waiver at Temple Ohabai Shalom on November 20th, 22nd, 23rd, and from November 11th through November 17th. And this is in connection with their performances, and specifically in connection with their generator, electrical generator, to make those performances possible.
And their rehearsals.
Right, and rehearsals. All in favor, say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Thank you all.
And
Good
can I
luck.
just add that Temple Ohabai Shalom is a fabulous location for an opera performance. I hope it all goes beautifully and acoustically. Good luck.
Our next item is further consideration of the Override Study Committee reports of Superintendent of Schools Bill Lupini and Schools Committee Chairwoman Susan Ditkoff are here to discuss budgetary implications of various override scenarios. And this is pursuant to our request. Superintendent Lupini, I know you got a extensive PowerPoint presentation for you, so without...
You have a handout, too.
The handout's coming
Yes,
around.
we've got them.
You do, and
They
they're
are-
slightly different.
Arriving.
Okay?
So without further ado, go right ahead.
Let me make sure I know what I'm doing here. I do know what I'm doing. I'm set. So,
Polar
thanks.
bears?
Pardon?
You're doing polar bears?
Polar bears. Yeah, well. So thank you for having us here this evening. The purpose of this discussion is your request that we take a look at the Group 1 and Group 2 scenarios, I'll say adjusted, and I'll go through some detail on that with you, and talk about specifics in terms of what we might do budgetarily. I should say up front, so these are scenarios. They're not approved budgets. Just as I know at some point, whether it's tonight or some other time, we'll discuss a no override scenario. All of these discussions will go through a normal school committee budget process. We've had 2 pretty lengthy conversations about these scenarios, so I think that school committee are knowledgeable about what we're presenting to you, and they've had some opportunity to discuss it in some detail. But these are not approved budgets by any stretch of the imagination, nor should they be viewed as such for this evening's purposes. So with that, let me start you here. So you have a handout that has a little bit more detail to this, called Enrollment Growth and Actions Taken. But we've all been discussing enrollment issues in the district since 07-08. The 07-08 superintendent budget message references enrollment growth in the system. I think what we said at that time is we'd seen enrollments that were higher than our normal. They had been north of 500 students instead of our normal 450. I think it was 420 to 440 when I came here. And you can see some level of detail of the actions that have been taken since for those who've tuned into us now in the last 6 months to a year and believe this is a new discussion. It's something we've actually been engaged with many of you in different roles. Mr. Wyszynski in a number of roles represented up here in various pieces of this conversation since 07-08. So we've made do. We've made do because we have had some capacity to grow, because we have an extraordinary group of people who work at our buildings and who work with me in the central office, and who have kept as their focus during all of that time that despite the fact that we're having to deal with substandard classrooms and conditions and lunches that begin at 10:30 and all of those accompanying intricacies of scheduling students, that the number one and the primary purpose for us is providing a fantastic education for every student here. And we believe we've done that while we've grown by nearly 2,000 students. But as I've said to you before, we're out of time. We're out of time in terms of our buildings, and I know you've seen our short-term and long-term space needs and options, and just how intricate what we're going to have to deal with now will be. And we're out of time in terms of the budget strategies that we've put forward over the last number of years to focus on the classroom at the expense of supports like nursing, like guidance counselors, like OT, like PT, speech, like technology, that have all suffered in this school system, and our students have therefore suffered as a result of the budget strategies that we've had to put in place to provide classroom instruction for those students. So we're out of time. We always start with a discussion in any of these kind of meetings of our core values, because really that's the basis of our budgets. So this is a slide I used earlier with you to talk about some of the programs that are in place and how they're traceable back to our core values. So our core values of high achievement for all, excellence in teaching, collaboration, respect for human differences, and educational equity drive first and foremost our core commitments of small class sizes, that teaching matters, that our focus is on all students, and clearly in that equity does not mean equal for each student, a focus on neighborhood schools and on quality early education, and add to those core commitments the fact that while we continue to talk here about growth in student population, we spend far less time and need to spend more time on the diversification of that student body as we've grown. The diversity of needs. I've said to you before, I believe I said the last time I was here, that this year 38% of our incoming kindergarten students required a language screening, a home language screening. 38%. That's a new high, up from last year's high. So not only are we growing, but our student body is becoming more diverse, with more diverse needs that are not being supported by the budget strategies that we've put in place over the last number of years of focusing almost exclusively on classroom teachers. So these are some examples of some programs that are in place that really are traceable back to those core commitments and those core beliefs. We have a growing population of English language learners, a growing number of languages spoken in the district. We just went through, and you'll hear me highlight a couple of times tonight, a program review around our enrichment and challenge support. By the way, one of the few school systems in the Commonwealth that have programming for what's traditionally known as gifted and talented. They simply don't exist in this Commonwealth. It exists here. A commitment to METCO, our Steps to Success program, which has the same staffing that it had when we were 4 points less in free and reduced lunch and had a smaller student population. Elementary World Language program put in the 08 override, performing arts and music, social emotional learning and bullying prevention, where we've seen great gains in what our students report to us in terms of the way they treat one another in our schools. And the Landmark School Collaborative, which I'll try to mention at least one other time tonight, which is a collaboration, one of the first in the Commonwealth, between the private Landmark School and the public schools of Brookline to provide professional development for our teachers to increase their array of strategies that they can use in the classroom. And we're now in our 4th school of implementing that professional development model. High school programs, there's our school within a school program, one of the first of its kind in the Commonwealth. The calculus project designed specifically when we stood in front of you in the school committee a number of years ago talking about the lack of students of color who were able to access and succeed in our upper level math courses. Today I believe the number is 10 students of color who are juniors and who are accessing those courses. Not exclusively because of this project, but in large part because of this project. Our global leadership program, our foreign exchanges, our tutorial program, which is part of the larger 4+1 at Brookline High School, the BRIGHT program, which continues to be modeled, started here in collaboration between Brookline Mental Health and the Brookline Public Schools in an effort to ensure that students who were out of school for medical conditions could return to school on a reduced time schedule. I count at least 12 models around the Commonwealth that have been taken from this model, the first of the models in the Commonwealth of BRIGHT programming. A wide array of athletics, the Opportunity for Change program, and the African American and Latino Scholars program, all important programs to the fabric of this school system. So we showed you a number of slides around our achievement. The last time I singled out this time to make sure that we talk about the but in that achievement, which is simply that we've plateaued in almost every one of these indicators that we show you, all at very high levels, but that have plateaued. And what you would see if you looked beneath the surface is widening gaps. That's not an accident. It's happening because of the strategies that we've had to employ over the last number of years to keep any pace with our growing student population and the fact that that student population is becoming more diverse by the day. So in terms of looking at what you asked us to do for tonight, I want to start back at the beginning and then take you through the numbers that we worked against in presenting these scenarios for you. So the original school department model that we put forward was a model of about 12.3 million. It assumed, if you recall, 630 incoming kindergarten students each year and a 1% collective bargaining increase each year. So the OSC, the two groups recommended override and local revenues/reductions, Group 1 of 7.9 million and Group 2 of 10.7 million. Remember that 2.9 million of each of those scenarios is made up of local revenue increases and expense reductions. So the override specified by Group 1 is 5 million. The override specified by Group 2 is 7.8? 7.9, thank you. So we've been working with this terminology of the 65% model and the 90% model. So let me show you what we did from there, I believe in consultation with you. So we initially took that school department projection and factored in, instead of a 1% increase, a 2% increase. There were a number of adjustments made, the first of which I think I mentioned to you the last time we were here, in that there's $1 million in our current budget from one-time funds. Secondly, there was an adjustment, and Mr. Cronin is certainly more qualified to explain the nuances of these adjustments than I am, but there was an adjustment of the health insurance number from an assumption of 5% to, I believe, 4%. There was a change in the assumption around Chapter 70 and what we might receive over this 3-year period. I believe it was $400,000 a year was the change in assumption. And there were a number of changes in local aid that, again, I'll leave to Mr. Cronin. But the net effect of all of these changes was a $200,000 reduction in the gap, which left us with an adjusted PSB projection of 14.3 million. We applied the percentage of 65 and 90 to those and came out with an OSC adjusted recommendation as a percent of the adjusted projection of 9.3 and 12.9 million. When you factor out the 2.9 million, it leaves you with an OSC adjusted override of 6.4 million and 10 million. And that's what we worked against. So our adjusted projection was 14.3, our adjusted new funding 9.3 and 12.9, meaning that in the Group 1 assumption, we're working against a shortfall to the model of $5 million. And in Group 2, we're working against a shortfall to the model of $1.4 million. And that's the scenarios that I'm working in presenting to you tonight, if that makes sense to you.
Can I don't want to take you off your stride, but I just want to ask a question. So I am sure that there is going to be some pushback on some of the reductions that the Override Study Committee or reductions or increases in fees or reductions of budget things on the town side of the budget. So I should take your numbers and mentally add on to the shortfall if I think that some of the other recommendations are not feasible.
So one of the things, thank you for that. One of the things that you'll see in one of my slides at the end of the discussion of each of the scenarios is some things that we think are challenges within each of the scenarios. You've just highlighted one of them. That is that up till this point, the 2.9 million has been an assumption that we have used, right? And you believe that there are concerns about some pieces of that. I believe I expressed to you the last time we were here that there are some things on the school side of that we are concerned about, not the least of which is that some part of it's already been implemented and you can't count it twice. But to this point, we've continued to work with that 2.9 as an assumption for this modeling. But you're absolutely correct.
Okay.
Okay? All right, so let me find my place here. So, what I want to take you through first is a little bit of a discussion about the long-term model. What we'll call for these discussions the 100%. Okay? So, this model included a robust technology plan that advances teaching and learning in our classrooms for all teachers and students, that creates equity of access, as we discussed with you the last time we were here, across all of our schools, and enhances our ability to provide teachers and leaders with access to data to utilize in their work. We talked here about a rigorous, updated, and aligned curriculum where we're able to provide all learning spaces, classrooms, learning centers, libraries, a manner which is equipped with the tools, materials, and supplies necessary to make sure that our curriculum is rigorous, updated, and aligned. We talked about meeting the continuum of student needs for meaningful learning by enhancing programs like enrichment and challenge support, mathematics specialists, intervention programs, tutorial, and our literacy specialist model to make sure that they are appropriate and that they ensure equity and access across all of our schools. Also in that category, we talked about providing support for students beyond their academics, nurses, guidance counselors, psychologists, with attention to the whole child in an appropriate manner to ensure equity and access across all of our schools. We talked about appropriate administrative structures in terms of the elementary level, the high school level, and the central office to ensure that student safety, supervision and evaluation, family and community engagement, and data use and culture are in place across the entire system. We talked about a commitment to global education through the enhancement of our elementary world language program. We talked about appropriate class sizes, making sure, hold on one second. Okay, I went too fast. We talked about maintaining the uniqueness and richness of course offerings at Brookline High School. You know, our consultant, who some of you know, who's working with us on the high school project, has remarked about the richness and variety of courses available at Brookline High School, which is not available at most high schools. That's something we want to maintain and enhance. Our commitment to closing opportunity gaps through programs like Steps to Success, the Calculus Project, and making sure that every student meets or exceeds Brookline's high standards by providing them with the full access and opportunities for learning. And it is through a model where we have regular education interventions in occupational therapy, physical therapy, and speech that's accomplished. Now class size. Maintaining class size of up to 22 students per class in grades K through 3 and up to 24 students per class in grades 4 through 8, which I'll discuss in a little while as well. Program development to support special education and English language learners. We've had many conversations here about the success that we've had in ensuring that Brookline students who have IEPs can have an education in Brookline. That is, the reductions that have occurred in our out-of-district placements. And I've said to you then, and I'll say again tonight, that does not happen accidentally. It happens because quality programs are built and parents are convinced that their children will be better served here than at places like Landmark and Carroll and other private institutions. We believe most of those students belong here. We've reduced those numbers dramatically, but it's going to take a continued effort of program building to do that. The same thing with meeting our ELL populations, right? We have a varied, we have changed, let me say this, we have changes in some of the languages that are considered now among our top 5. Just in the last 2 years, Arabic has become one of our top 5 languages in the district. 3 years ago, there were 0 students who had that as their primary language. So we've seen some shifts in languages present in the district. and keeping up with those programs and meeting the needs of our families for translation services is a key aspect for a district that is diversifying as quickly as ours is. We want to make sure that the Old Lincoln School is a quality learning experience for students when they go there. We made the right first step when we hired Monica Crowley as the principal, but making sure that we provide the right kinds of supports beyond the classroom teachers who will go there from devotion and the schools to be named later is a really important part of this plan. We need a budget for instructional supplies that provide educators with the full array of tools, materials, and experiences to meet the needs of learners. So here's a news flash. The cost of these materials has gone up, right? And if you're going to provide the kinds of hands-on materials that students need in science classrooms and other classrooms, they cost money. These budgets have also been a place that we have robbed from over the last number of years to make sure that we could continue to put teachers in classrooms. So we originally set out here to provide the primary grade support for students and classroom teachers. That is, you remember discussions we've had over the last number of years about the kindergarten and first grade paraprofessional model, where we have a para in every one of those classrooms. And the goal was to both provide support for classroom teachers and also to reduce the number of students who had one-to-one paraprofessionals when they get later into the elementary schools. And guess what? That's exactly what's happened. But the original intent of that model was to add a second grade component. And one of the goals of the original projection model was to be able to do that. We also wanted to meet the academic, social, and emotional needs of students through guidance counselors, nurses, psychologists, which I mentioned earlier. And we wanted to make sure that we could provide quality professional learning opportunities for our teachers. Because goodness knows at the state and federal level, we've certainly seen enough come down for classroom teachers. We also have initiatives within the district, and we want to make sure that we provide them with the learning opportunities they need to be able to make sure that they deliver outstanding service to our students. This was the original intent of the model that we put forward. And we had numbers attached, some that you'll see later on in the presentation. So let's talk about the 90%. So here's the key to what I'm going to talk about. When you see something in italics, it means it's changed from the 100%. In a moment, when you see something fly off the screen, it'll mean that it's not actually included in the 90%. Okay? So let's talk about some of these items. So the technology plan in the 90% model is funded at the 3-year levels put forward in the original model, with one major change. And I want to thank Mr. Stokes for this and the conversations that we've had. We have modified the assumption around staffing in the technology model from one that was $175,000 each year over 3 years to one that's $100,000 over 3 years. So when you see a number around the technology plan, you'll notice that there's a $225,000 reduction in the plan. It's all around that staffing assumption, and we're actually meeting, I think it's next week, to talk about that assumption and what that could look like. It's also actually, you'll see later on, part of the administrative study that we're doing on the school side right now. The rigorous update and aligned curriculum, we have unfortunately chosen to reduce slightly the instructional supply budget here. And that's why you see a change there. That's a slight modification. Again, I'll show you specifics later on in terms of the change that was made. Appropriate administrative structures, we've made reductions from the original model in what we assumed for central administration and what we assumed for high school administration. But all of these other areas in the 90% model remain the same as they were, in the 90% scenario, remain the same as they were in the original model that we put forward. On the second page of this, appropriate class sizes, program development to support special education, quality learning experience at Old Lincoln School, but primary grade support is gone. The second grade paraprofessional model is factored out in the 90% model. We prioritized other items on this list over that intervention at the 90% level. We also made changes to academic, social, and emotional needs of students. That particular item we modified, as you'll see later, in terms of the specifics, the assumption around the number of guidance counselors that we would add, and we modified those assumptions. We modified the assumption in terms of nursing as well. So that does not represent what was there originally, and we modified fairly dramatically the amount of money spent toward professional learning opportunities for our teachers. I'll come back to some detail on that, on some additional detail on that when we get to the individual areas that I'm going to walk you through a couple and that you have copies in front of you. So in the 65% model, we, as you might imagine, needed to make some choices. And I will tell you that in terms of what we put forward for the school committee's discussion, we made choices in the areas, in many of the areas that have been neglected over the last number of years. We continued those choices. I'll say here that we kept the same commitment to regular education interventions. We kept the same commitment to guidance counselors as in the 90% model. We kept the same commitment to nurses as in that model. And we made sacrifices in other areas, some of them that are part of our current program, in order to meet those areas, often referred to as catch-up, that have been neglected for the past number of years of our growth. One area we did not make that change to in terms of what's been put on the table, and another of those areas that's been neglected, is our technology plan. It remains the same across the original model, the 90% scenario, and the 65% scenario. Where you see things in darker italics, it means it's a change even from the 90% model. So let me show you what goes, and then we can talk about some of these other areas. So meeting the continuum of student needs for meaningful learning moves off. Let me explain why. We make in this 65% model, let me give you the technical piece and let me explain to you then what it means. The original high school staffing model was based on a ratio of 1 student to every 14.25 students. That is our present ratio. That's not class sizes. That's adults to students. That's what allows programs to operate. In the 65% model, we changed that assumption to 1 to 16. 1 to 16. Now let me tell you what happens as a result of changing that assumption to 1 to 16. One or more of three things happens. First, you lose support programs, like tutorial, or they're scaled back. Second, you have increases in class size. Or third, you have some of that unique array of courses that disappears. I can't tell you tonight which one of those or ones of those happens. That will take a lot of consultation with the headmaster and a lot of work with the high school administration. But I can tell you we will start the conversation in those three areas. That's what will happen. That's what will happen as a result of that ratio change. The commitment to global education moves off. Not that we don't have global education programs continuing at the high school, but that removes the elementary world language program. Not the enhancements that we talked about in the 90% model, but the program is gone in the 65% scenario. I mentioned earlier the course offerings at Brookline High School as one other thing that would be affected by that change in ratio, so move it to the side. It changes. And closing the opportunity gaps. We enhanced in the 90% model the Steps to Success model by 2 positions. Many of you have been associated with that program and know that the conversation has been about the numbers of students who are now living in poverty in this district, the number of students who are living just above the poverty line in this district, and our staffing model is the same as it was in 2004. There have been discussions about moving that program into younger grades, and there have been discussions about moving that program to serve students who don't necessarily live in public housing. Both worthy discussions, both necessary discussions, both possible discussions in the 90% model. None of those a possible discussion in the way we've looked to this point at the 65% model. And the administrative structures, we actually made one additional change at the high school in terms of administration in this 65% model. So here are the areas that were highlighted in the that are highlighted in the 65 and the comparison of those to the 90. So class sizes moves off. And the reason it moves off is we make assumptions about consolidations at the elementary level in this model that we did not make in the 90. So that means that whether we can actually take advantage of them or not, as we've managed to capture in budgets over the last number of years, they will happen because they would happen as part of this model. So some of you have looked at these numbers that we operate across grade levels. And we do every year. This year we were fortunate to find, I think it was 3 consolidations in that budget. But that's a far cry from making a 3-year set of assumptions that we'll capture at least 1 each year. But that's the assumption that we've had to factor in here. And by the way, the one thing I will say that, over the last 2 years, I think a lot of people have talked particularly about the last 2 years and the tightness of our range in assignments in K and 1. Well, the tighter those assignments, if there aren't significant shifts later on, the more difficult it is to find consolidations. So again, I'll just read, just for effect, if you will. Kindergarten, Ignacio got to listen to me read these to him today, so I want him to hear them a second time today, so I'll just share it. The kindergarten classes right now, there are 692 students, and there are 31 sections. And those classes look like this: 23, 23, 22, 23, 22, 22, 23, 22, 23, 23, 24, 23, 23, 21, 22, 22, 23, 23, 23, 24, 22, 23, 22, 21, 22, 21, 22, 22, 22, 21, and 20. There aren't consolidations there. Now, we'll see what happens throughout, but that's a very tight range for an average class size of, I think, Mr. Rowe, 21.5, if I'm correct. And that's what the first grade looks like as well. So consolidations become more difficult as those numbers inch up, and those numbers have inched up. So primary grade support for students and teachers is gone. It was gone in the 90% model. It doesn't come back in the 65. And so just to kind of summarize these, there are a number of things that are partially achieved or not achieved in the 65. We are able to acceptably equip learning spaces, certainly not are able to provide the instructional materials, supplies that we are in the other model that we believe are necessary. Some resources are provided. We believe there's some effect on the tutorial program, the 4+1 model at the high school. Resources necessary to support students beyond their academics are acceptable levels. That is, we haven't met ratios that we sought to achieve in terms of nurses, guidance counselors, and psychologists. Administrative structure is in place at the elementary level. We've eliminated the elementary world language program in this model, eliminated it. We've eliminated the 4th grade instrumental program in this model. We've eliminated richness of course offerings, appropriate class sizes, and/or supports. The tutorial is an example at Brookline High School. We've made changes to class sizes at the elementary level through consolidations, and we've eliminated the enrichment and challenge support program, which was actually in the 90% model for an enhancement. And so there's one thing I want to point out very clearly in terms of those two areas. The difference between the 90%, so people will say, we'll talk about ECS and elementary world language as two examples being in here. I want to be really clear that in the 90% model, the elementary world language program is enhanced. Right now, we run sixth grade model as a 3 by 45 minutes per class session. It's run 3 times a week, 45 minutes. In this model, in the 90% model, it's run as 5 days a week at 45 minutes, or, and we haven't made this decision yet, or we would allow students in 6th grade to have an option between 2 languages like they do in 7th and 8th grade. So the elementary program runs 1 language. So one of the ideas that we've tinkered around with in this model is that students would have a choice beginning in 6th grade of that language. Okay? The Enrichment and Challenge Support Program in the 90% model is enhanced. We've had a very active program review underway. They've made some terrific recommendations in terms of staffing, in terms of math focus of the program, and we've incorporated those recommendations into the 90%, as we said we would a year ago when these conversations began. But it's not possible to maintain that in the 65% model. So, concerns in both scenarios. So neither the 90% or 65% scenario include the enrollment component, which has been part of the town school partnership for the last number of years. I believe that component is averaged somewhere around $400,000 to $500,000 per year. The thinking has been that that component would not be part of the town school partnership given the override. So I just want to keep on the table that it's not there at $400,000 to $500,000 per year. Both this 90 and the 65 show existing space rentals of $550,000 per year, and our projected future space rentals, which we're right now projecting at $200,000. And again, you've seen the short-term space options, so you know what I'm talking about in terms of those potential space rentals. Additional early education classrooms being the key to that. We've projected another $200,000, so there's $750,000 a year in space rental in our budget, beginning with these scenarios. Transportation costs for devotion school students to Old Lincoln for next year, before the project actually kicks in, are not part of either scenario. And to the point that was raised earlier, both scenarios assume $2.9 million in local revenues and expenditure reductions, and that has yet to be tested. So caveats on either model. Now, I don't want to take you through each one of these, but I want you to know they're here. They're actually in your packet. What we've done is an example, and I'll walk you through this one, and I can show you a couple of others as well, is we've actually compared the long-range model to the 90% scenario to the 65% scenario. Some in terms of FTEs, some in terms of dollars. And we've tried to give you a narrative on what occurs in each. So let me talk about this one. So in the original model, there were 15.6 classroom teachers, K to 8. Now there are 22.1. What happened? Well, we changed the assumption, remember? To 650 students incoming each year. And so that increased the number of teachers because, as you may recall, each section actually equals 1.3 FTE. That's to account for the art, the music, and the physical education that come along with each section. So each section adds 1.3 FTE. Now in the 65% scenario, as I explained to you a few minutes ago, we actually then take that 22.1 and assume a consolidation each year, bringing that number to 18.2. Does the chart make sense? So each one of these you'll find in that structure. Remember I said at the high school, in the 65% scenario, we actually take the ratio to 1 adult to every 16 students. That actually changes this so that we actually reduce our high school staffing over this 3-year period by 5 staff members. And remember, these are now the high school numbers we're working against. The original projections are shown in the green. The revised projections to take into account our present 4th through 8th grades are shown in the blue. Let me just pick out a couple others of these. This is what I meant when I said guidance and psychologist. The original model was based on a ratio of 1 to one for 350 students at K through 8, and 1 to 195 students at grades 9 through 12. We've changed those assumptions to 1 to 400 and 1 to 250, and reduced the model in both the 90% and the 65% by 2.2 FTE. And this is the kind of analysis, and again, that you have in front of you for each area, whether it's elementary world language, central administration, vice principals, high school administration, steps to success. There's exactly what I laid out for you. The model showed an increase. The 90% scenario shows an increase. The 65% shows no increase. The enrichment and challenge support, as I indicated to you, the 90% scenario shows an increase for ECS resource teachers, coordination of the program, and math specialists. The 65% scenario shows elimination of the program. And you have there also the charge that was provided to the program review committee. Here's our technology initiative, and again, what you'll see there between the long-range model and the 90 and 65% scenarios is the factoring out of $225,000 for staffing. Again, thanks to the great work that we've been able to accomplish with Mr. Stokes. And here again are some things we've been able to accomplish already this year in the technology plan, which I'm happy to go through with you, and then the goals of that technology plan for 16 through 18. Literacy specialists, math specialists, again, areas where we've not varied the commitment. It's been long enough. So I guess that's what I really want to title some of these areas that people would look at in the 65 and say, why didn't you make reductions there? Because we've made reductions for the last 5 to 6 years. Those reductions have been maintaining the same kinds of support staff that our students need, that our students require in a time when our enrollments have been growing and our enrollments have been diversifying. Enough. There's what we've done with professional learning and innovation. Again, not where it should be, but a sacrifice that we've made in these scenarios in order to meet our goals in a number of other key areas. Custodial repair and maintenance, instructional supplies, nurses, and student service interventions in occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech, and board-certified behavior analysts in an RTI model, response to intervention model, designed to serve students before, to intervene when students are regular education before they require that legal document in order to access these services. And so the summary is, I should start this by saying, when comparing the two models, set the 100% model over here for a second. When comparing these two scenarios, the 90% scenario of the two provides funding to best meet the core values of the school system as well as to meet our enrollment-driven needs. The 65% scenario will lead to the reduction or elimination of core commitments and programs. In the scenario that we've put forward, and again, feel free to remove those and substitute your own, because somewhere it results in the elimination of something in our core commitments and programs. In this scenario that we've prepared, enrichment and challenge support, elementary world language, 4th grade instrumental music, elementary class size, and key aspects of the Brookline High School experience, class size, course offerings, and academic support all suffer. So again, I can go through any of these that you'd like me to. We tried to provide you with a level of detail that we all thought you might want to see, while making sure that we stayed sort of at the highlights of the overall consideration of the model, and I'm happy to try to answer any questions you may have.
Selectman Waschinsky.
One of the things I'm struggling with is in both of these models, the way I think of budgeting is I start at the low number and then kind of work my way up. You're starting at a high number and working your way down. And to me, the number to work your way up from is the no override number. So because that's in effect going to be on the ballot, and I know that you're not prepared to talk to that scenario and I presume you will be in a few weeks, and perhaps you can talk to that in a second. But the 65% still represents a 9-point-something million dollar increase in the budget. Yet we're here. The only thing I'm hearing in the 65% is cuts, and then the 90% is a 12-point-something million dollar increase in the budget, and I'm still hearing cuts. But how can it be cuts against the no override scenario? And I presume that backing this up is going to be, a detail, down to, it represents X positions, and here's how we're going to allocate them. We're going to be getting to that level of detail by the time we have to make a decision.
So,
It's a lot of questions.
No, it's a lot of good questions, though. Thank you. We actually have some of that level of detail by year for the 3 years. So one of the things that we started with from the beginning of the modeling was trying to project those over the course of actually what was a program through FY22. So the original, and I know you've seen it, the original model took us through FY22 with a certain set of assumptions. So we have that. We have to go back and take a look at it. So I'm sure we have a lot of work to do on a no override scenario, but you're right, we didn't start there because I actually don't know what that number is. Because I don't actually know until we sit down and have a conversation about that, what part of that we're expected to reduce against, right? And whether the assumption is that the school department will make the entire reduction of what's necessary, right? Or whether there'll be some other discussion about what that allocation will look like. And we've not had that conversation, so I don't actually know what a no override scenario is until I see those numbers.
I think though you're, to Neil's question, you're talking about cuts was in relation to your 100% scenario.
We're talking about reductions against the 100% scenario, and I hope what I pointed out as well through just some examination of some of these individual areas is the accomplishments that we're able to bring to the program and to students in each of these scenarios. I mean, yes, it's true that the classroom teachers, that we are able to bring additional classroom teachers. We are, however, in that scenario, going to see changes in class size. You need to know that, right? We're able to honor commitments to special education and ELL. We're able to honor the same scenario that we did with guidance and psychologists, which improves in many ways the situation for students at our elementary schools, where until this past year we've not added guidance or psychologists. So I'm sorry if it feels like I'm only portraying them against cuts. There are a number of those. That's why we've provided you with this level of detail, where you can see the additions to program that are created even within the 65% scenario. My point was that in order to accomplish a number of things that are in the 100%, the model, the original model that was put forward, we believe with reason around to accomplish some of those things, that reductions are necessary in some other areas, that a close examination of our overall program and prioritization of those areas is necessary, and those will be difficult conversations.
Selectman DeWitt.
It would help me in the way that you have added some cost factors to the rental space. If you could give us, in effect, the cost of creating a new facility at the Old Lincoln School, roughly what number of classrooms you anticipate to provide in that facility, and the cost of it
I'm sorry.
I mean, I'm assuming that over the 3-year period, it will be fully occupied. Right?
That's our assumption,
Yeah,
yes.
okay, all right, but in your projections, that's really my question.
So let me say this, it actually was in the last presentation that we did. There's a number, there's an assumed number, I think it's in the $670,000 range, and that's above and beyond the moving of, say, the 7th and 8th grade staff from one school to that school.
Right.
Okay, there are costs in terms of running a school. Some of
Right.
it's people, and some of it's other factors.
Well, that's why I compared it to the rented space.
Right. So the one kind of, and I think I even mentioned this the last time, the one kind of iffy area in that is that people think it's just a matter when you move the 7th and 8th grade, for example, from devotion, it's a matter of moving the people who teach 7th and 8th grade. And that's true, except that some of those people are marbled into other grade levels, and they aren't easily extracted to move from one building to another. So there are some additional costs there. But most of the costs are around opening a building, establishing an office staff, those kinds of area, custodial staff, those kinds of areas. So we have that. We actually, I think in that presentation, had the breakdown, but we'll be happy to publish that again.
The $500,000 that you said is assumed to no longer be part of the town-school
Yes.
partnership transfer. So let's explore that a second. So why not amend the town-school partnership, give the schools that $500,000 that they're getting anyway, and reduce the override by that $500,000? Two things. I don't think you have to amend the
Mr.
town.
Kleckner should be answering that question.
I don't think you have to amend the town-school partnership, and then for the second part of my answer, I was going to turn it over to Mr. Kleckner to answer that question.
When was that?
Right now.
Well, certainly, the school-town partnership is a model, is an approach, and we have varied from that in the past, and we will continue to do so. Obviously, we've discussed those components. We haven't made any decisions about that. What we want to make sure that when we adjust the school-town partnership, we're doing it things that can be sustainable, become part of the long-term base, and also that's equitable. And, we don't want to do things that are going to then create consequences, negative consequences too. So we have to look at those. But I think those are obvious things that we are looking at, and I think that's why they're on in the superintendent's presentation.
By the way, when I say why not, I'm not saying I'm advocating, I'm asking for the rationale.
Yeah, I just want to respond to that, because I do feel that on the town side of the budget, we have been cutting for years, and we have many needs on the town side of the budget that we have just said, oh, well, we can't do, because especially for the past number of years, we've been giving more of, whatever money was available to the schools, knowing that they had this, imminent disastrous problem on their hands. But that doesn't mean that the needs on the town side have gone away. And so, I frankly am concerned about some of the recommendations of the Override Study Committee in terms of the town side of the budget, I will say. And I hope we'll have a night to fully discuss those.
More questions?
Let me just expand on Nancy's statement. How are we going to get, what's going to be our process? We have a proposal and then a proposed financing plan, part of which is an override, and then other parts are increases in fees and then some reductions. So, how are we going to get there? So, are we going to have a session on the town side? That was our initial cost. That was our initial discussion. So I just want to make sure that's still on track. I just lost my thought.
It's okay. Well, sticking with town side assumptions, I assume that Mr. Cronin's been in on this, the assumptions that have been made regarding.
Yes, he has, and in fact, the walkthrough I did with you around those changes in assumptions came from Mr. Cronin. As I said earlier, if you want a more detailed conversation with about those, it would be Mr. Cronin you'd want to have that conversation with, not your superintendent.
And 2% collective bargaining is at the core of those assumptions?
2% collective bargaining for exactly the same reasons that I laid out for you in our initial presentation, yes.
Selectman Daley?
Yeah, I wonder if you can just walk us through, I did recently talk to a Brookline parent who, due to the crowding, one of her children's classes had recently moved her child to a private school setting. And she did say to me, yes, it's true, Brookline schools are way behind in the technology. So can you tell us a little bit about what the technology landscape looks like in the 65%, the 90%, and your 100%?
Sure. So I mean, you probably read the piece, which I think does it as well as anything, that was in the tab recently about what's been accomplished just in the first year of implementation of that technology plan. Just as some examples, in FY15, we are nearing completion of installing mounted projection at Brookline High School. In nearly all classrooms, we've implemented Google Apps for Education in our middle grades. We have a high-quality wireless connectivity at every school. She's right. 3 years ago, there wasn't high-quality wireless in our schools. 3 years ago. All full-time staff now are provided with appropriate computers on a 4-year replacement cycle. That had ranged, Mr. Stowe, to I think it was 5 to 6 years at one time a few years ago. Chromebooks are readily available for sign-out at Brookline High School and access to devices for students with greatest needs. I know school committee knows this issue and focused on this issue, that we had many teachers who, when we provided the wireless network, were beginning to move ahead with using technology in their classrooms and assignments, with one slight problem: a number of our students didn't have access. And so this year, we've made Chromebooks available for sign-out for students, so that no student is denied access to a part of the curriculum because of not having the technology.
Is there a program to allow students to buy computers at a favorable price?
You keep wanting to jump ahead on me tonight, so
sorry.
that's okay. That's perfectly okay. In the 16 to 18 plan, we've talked about more online resources available and accessed by students and educators, core texts in accessible format for all students. I can tell you know a little bit about my youngest daughter. My two youngest went to Beverly High School, where they've had a technology plan, a bring your own device one-to-one program for the last 5 years. And she, she's legally blind and does not have the need to access. She used to have enlarged textbooks that we would either carry to and from school. That was a chore, or we would keep at home, and now everything's online. All her textbooks are online and are on the laptop that she carries, right? Online learning opportunities available for and accessed by students and educators, state tests, which this Commonwealth is moving toward a robust assistive technology effort so that all students with disabilities have their needs met, a common learning management system for parents, for our staff, for our students, every classroom with the appropriate projection system, data collection and analysis systems in place to support teachers having teachers and principals having ready access to data on student performance, school-based and system staff having appropriate access to data, educators with digital literacy self-assessment tools so we can figure out where they are and what their needs are in professional development, and a system-supported bring your own device program for students is in this plan.
And that's the 100% plan or the 90%?
Well, remember, we didn't vary this plan across the scenarios.
Okay.
This plan's there. Technology, as the person you ran into on the street said, technology efforts have not been met in this system for quite some time. And we do not meet in terms of the technology used by our staff, in terms of the teaching and learning tools used by our staff in terms of the expectations and what's made available for our students, we certainly do not look like the districts who we like to compare ourselves to put it mildly. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, so, and if we did the things you just said, would we look more like the schools we typically compare ourselves to?
We would at the very least have what Eric Conti, my good colleague in Burlington, calls the basic plumbing, right?
Okay.
And that's not a bad place to be. At the end of this cycle, we would have those things that I mentioned in place for all of our staff, those kinds of opportunities available for students. We would certainly see more use of online tools in teaching and learning, and yes, that's not a bad place to be.
Selectman Waschinsky.
Question, I guess, I don't know whether this goes to Mel or Bill. What's our timetable for figuring out a recommendation on the no override scenario, and then any suggested modifications to the town-school partnership?
In terms of I'll take the last one first. The school-town partnership, we continue to look at that as we build our revenues. And I would just say, I commit that if it's possible, we will adjust that, the model, as much as we can to reduce the override ask. And then in terms of the no override, we've begun to discuss this. You know, we're looking obviously for some policy direction from the board and the school committee, but absent that, I think in a couple of weeks, we'd be prepared to start fashion the context of what that could look like. I would say that I think it is important for this board to look at all of the override study committee recommendations, to do that in connection with what we may be willing to do in terms of the town side of the budget. So I think what I would recommend is the board do have a session dealing with some of the municipal side, either expenditures or non-tax increases, revenue increases. And also, I think we need a session on the capital as well.
Aren't we due in early December for a projection normally? Wouldn't that be about the target? I guess I'm asking, is that still reasonable, or do we want to try to reconsider?
Yeah, no, I think we're there. We'll be there in terms of the revenues, for sure.
I want to just express a little skepticism about permanently redoing the town-school partnership basic principles. And to me, it's the schools are in a time of tremendous need. It's appropriate for us to be looking at, here's what we would do under the town schools partnership, but we're going to make adjustments. I'm somewhat, I think we should approach cautiously. I think the town school partnership has been a nice way to give some budgeting certainty to both the town and the school side of the budget, and has served us well for many, many years. And I think we have to be cautious about permanently adjusting those policies.
So can I just clarify, my understanding, the enrollment component is part of the town school partnership. By putting the enrollment component in, you're not modifying anything. It is part of the current agreement. Okay, it's there. What I'm suggesting here, all I'm suggesting, which started this great conversation, right, is that because of the possibility of overrides and the discussion of various scenarios, it's been, that component of that partnership has been set to the side for the time being.
Meaning it could
Okay, it's
still...
not a
meaning
putting
could
it
still
back in
come
is
back.
not a permanent change.
Meaning it could still come back.
Right,
You could
okay.
pass an override and still have...
But one of the things I do think we should be considering is whether we should look at whether some of their extraordinary expenses of renting space for some of the preschool activities would be appropriate to go into the CIP.
I think that's on the table as well.
Selectman Franco?
So we had an election 6 days ago now, and when this model was created, the state funding assumptions were possibly different than what there are today based on the rhetoric of the campaign. So I guess this is a question for either Mr. Rowe or Mr. Cronin or whoever else wants to jump into the fire on this. I'm wondering if further revenue revenue assumption changes need to be made in line with who was elected. The governor-elect has made a promise, I think, during the campaign to increase local aid going forward during his administration. I think it was a promise to increase local aid in line with increase in revenues that the state receives. So that's all by way of saying, I'm wondering if we need to change the assumptions that were made in the model about either Chapter 70 money that we'll receive or unrestricted government aid. Are we
And
in the right
don't I
ballpark?
recall that there's a review of Chapter 70 underway as we speak?
Yeah.
Mr. Cronin?
That's basically what we did. When the superintendent mentioned that, we went back and looked at a number of the assumptions. One of the more significant ones was we increased Chapter 78 over a 2-year period to get to that 17.5% threshold. So one of the old numbers, I think I had Chapter 70 grown by maybe 2.5% a year. In fiscal 16, it's $850,000 increase, so that's a pretty significant delta right there. And then in the second year, it's about $400,000, so it's about $1.2 million over that 2 years to get to that 17% threshold. These are approximate numbers, talking with somebody who knows Chapter 70, and it's really not that simple. So those have been updated. And in terms of the unrestricted aid, I'm pretty sure I've got level funding in there for 16, and then some modest growth in 17 and 18.
We've had some correspondence about my skepticism about the health of the state budget in the current fiscal year and presumably in the next fiscal year. So I would just ask that we continue to monitor that situation and adjust this model accordingly.
Understood.
Ms. Wolf Ditkoff or any of the other school committee members you
Can I
want to be
just say
heard?
to that, I'm sorry, can I just say to that point, I mean, we received notification today of the potential for 9C cuts, right, today, in the current year, from our legislative people at the Superintendent's Association. We're told that those conversations right now are within state departments about cuts in those departments, but we did just hear that, to your point, we did just hear that today.
9C.
9C.
That's
cuts
the
are
mid-year cuts.
Mid-year
Yes.
cuts, and
Governor has
Governor
the ability.
Patrick is considering those cuts now.
Thank you. I guess we'll end on that sobering note.
Right.
Sorry about that.
Well, thank you. I want to say thank you for putting this together, and I know we keep asking you to do more work, but it is worthwhile, and I certainly appreciate what you've given us here.
Thank you very much. Can I just say to finish this, I wanted to, so I'm an educator, right? I mean, I'm a teacher. And I just want to go back to this point just one last time to end. We have asked people to do an awful lot over the last few years in order to focus primarily on ensuring that we could put teachers in classrooms with kids. And we've made an awful lot of sacrifices in other areas. And I just want to emphasize one more time how close we are to the end of being able to do that. You looked at that short-term space options and needs. You see how close we are to really starting to run into some options that no one wants, right? And how close some of those pieces are. And the operating budget is in the same place. If I have one more conversation with principals about the need for the kinds of supports that we've laid out here in terms of literacy or math or guidance or nursing or social work or all of those areas, and that's because they've played ball with us over the last number of years, and they've bought into the assumption that the best expenditure of our limited dollars was in the classrooms with kids. And as it says here, we're out of time. So I really appreciate these conversations, and please feel free to invite me back again if you want to talk some more. Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm sure we'll have you.
Thank you, all the school committee members who are here, by the way. Appreciate it. All right, so that's 12, we've done 13, we've done
Nearly
article...
done, I think.
We're almost done. We have 2 warrant articles to discuss, both on taxi
I
medallions.
think so. I think that's it.
And we still don't have a, so we're now taking up agenda item 14, warrant articles 15 and 16. So we still don't have a report from the Moderators Committee, unless I missed it.
No,
right?
they said they would try to have it by town meeting, but that didn't sound...
So, yeah, sure,
We've
Chad,
got
come forward.
observers present.
Hi, Chad Ellis, member of the Moderators Committee and town meeting member. So we are very close to having a report for you. The quick information I can give you is that the committee remains divided on the sort of core question of whether medallions are a good policy. We have reached consensus on a number of items, both of fact and of somewhere between fact and opinion, which I'd be happy to discuss if you'd like. We are meeting on Thursday to finalize our report, and we've just haven't been able to get it finished. I think the impact of the summer on some of the committee members made it difficult to meet as often as we would like. But essentially, what you will receive is a list of areas of agreement that the committee has reached, some areas of disagreement. There will be some broad policy options that are possible, a medallion plan, a open license possibility, and then the status quo. There is consensus that the La Capra plan is not one that we would recommend going forward with. So if the selectmen, assuming town meeting votes to allow the medallions to continue and the selectmen choose to do so, there would need to be a new plan developed. And then quickly on the warrant articles themselves, I can say that the petitioner for warrant article 15 is working with town council and the moderator to strip out the provision that actually requires the selectmen to go back to the state. That was
Thank you.
Yes,
Yes.
but is the moderator going to allow that?
I believe so. I think that is acceptable, but, oh, he's here,
Yeah.
sorry.
It's, I emailed, the status of that is basically, the legal person on our team, I've already emailed back and forth with Sandy and with town council. The legal person on our team, who's a former U.S. Justice Department antitrust lawyer, she has certain concerns with the wording, and on Wednesday morning, she has a phone, she'll be speaking by phone with town council, and hopefully we can finalize the wording. The whole point, as I say, or as Chad said, is to remove the requirement of 15 that you folks go back to the state legislature. And the core of 15 is actually opposition to taxi medallions. The requirement of going to the state legislature has always been considered just a means to an end. And after I think it was you folks' last meeting 2 weeks ago or so, we heard very strongly that was one of your main objections to 15, and so that's when we started working on changing this. And as I say, this Wednesday phone appointment with town council is very important, and so we hope to have actual wording to submit to Sandy by the Thursday time. Oh, here you go, Chad. When hopefully the Moderators Committee will have finalized its report as well. Okay. So there are two aspects coming at you that we would hope you would actually hold off on a vote tonight before you get both of these pieces.
Did
to
we
consider.
already vote on this at all, or no?
No.
We never did.
And we apologize, both those of us on Article 15 and in the committee apologize for the proximity of this information to town meeting. We would have much rather gotten it to you much
Nancy,
Can I ask
just
Mr.
to
Cronin?
clarify, so far we've said we want to see the Moderators Committee report before we vote on it. I don't know if we still want to do
Yeah.
that, but that's what we've been
Well,
saying.
I want to ask Mr. Cronin, what's the deadline for getting something into the supplemental?
Next Thursday at noon.
So,
When are we meeting next?
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
No, that's town
Yeah,
meeting.
well, we'll meet before, we will meet.
Oh, this Thursday at
Thursday.
noon.
We will
Right.
meet next, a week
On the other
from
hand,
tomorrow.
I think it's doubtful we'll get to 15 and 16 on the first night, and if we could conceivably take a vote before the meeting on Tuesday and be ready to, and at least have a pass out for Thursday night.
Well, I'm very.
Because I'm willing to go along with the advisory committee in the absence of,
We can always reconsider.
Well,
Yeah.
Based on the email or the note that we got from Josh Safer, it seemed like the Moderators Committee was moving towards a referral motion.
No,
Is
so
that-
there was.
So who's the I and who's the we in this sort
Yeah,
of draft?
So I'm not sure when you got that. Josh and Mike proposed at either our last meeting or the one before that, a sort of what we do next step, which included a motion to refer and that we continue on. And we move very quickly away from that. I think that the one thing that we're hearing very clearly from the taxi industry as well as from other people involved is that this needs to be resolved. The taxi industry has been in limbo, waiting for medallions to go. Whether we're going to do it or not, they would like a decision to be taken. And I think also the consensus on the committee was that while, we were coming right up on the deadline, we had actually covered the issues and that there was not a lot of, there would not be a lot of value in saying, let's wait another 6 months for the next session of town meeting. So that possibility was raised. I don't know when you got that email, but I don't think that is anyone's current view on how we're going forward.
well, I will just say, if it's not appropriate, I'm willing to not move forward on medallions, but I don't want to waste our political capital asking our
Absolutely,
legislators
right.
to spend their time trying to revoke
I think
home rule legislation. So I'm willing to do what the advisory committee did,
Which is
just
no action on 15
Yep.
and favorable action on
on 16 as amended.
Right.
If 15 is going to be amended so that it doesn't have that issue in it.
Yeah, then we could reconsider.
We might reconsider.
Okay.
Yeah.
We might not.
But I think I think we have to do something for the supplemental mailing, and
Yeah.
I would say that,
You know, it was Josh Safer at the last Moderators Committee meeting who said,
get over the microphone.
Okay, sorry. It was Josh Safer at the last supplemental committee meeting who
Who
said...
are you, for the record?
Oh, I'm sorry,
The
John
people
Harris.
watching don't know.
Okay. John Harris, town meeting member, Precinct 8.
We-
And- Yes, and petitioner of warrant Article 15. At last Thursday's Moderators Committee meeting, Josh Safer said, they talked about when they could meet next. They realized the next available time, with the complication of Veterans Day, was this Thursday night, and they realized that was after the Thursday noon deadline for the supplemental. And for what it's worth, Josh, Safer knows much more procedure of this than I do. He said, well, what that means, it's still possible apparently to, print up documents and get them to you folks and apparently to town meeting members even after that last supplemental deadline.
Yeah, well, it wouldn't be possible, though, for us to get something into the supplemental mailing, for us to take a vote and get it into the supplemental mailing. So we can reconsider, but I feel, our policy has always been, at this point, when we are facing the absolute deadline to get something into the supplemental mailing, that we vote on what's on the table now, and I'd be happy to reconsider if you make adjustments to your article.
What if we have, as I say, the meeting, the phone conversation between our legal person and town council will be Wednesday morning. What if we were to finalize the revised wording on 15 in time to get that into the supplemental mailing?
But we don't meet until next Tuesday.
We would not be able to address it and vote on it.
I'm
which is
prepared to
my
take a vote
concern.
now, simply
Yeah.
because the
We will-
current
we'll ha-
language
we'll
is
be happy
unacceptable, as far as I'm
If you make a
concerned.
big change like that, we'll be happy to reconsider and take a look at it.
And
I feel like we
yeah.
owe town meeting some decision.
Well, and furthermore, there's a lot of uncertainty about what will get resolved by whom in what fashion
Yeah.
between now and next Tuesday.
Well, and our pre-town meetings are always rushed. And we
Yes.
don't know what other
No, it's a
changes are
quick-
going to...
It's always a quick meeting anyway, so. I have a question about 16, actually, just to, let's show here. It's a qu-
David Lescovier, Precinct 11, Town Meeting Member.
Thank you. The question is about the clause, the resolved clause that says that town meeting urges the Transportation Board, decisions and actions should make an effort to aim for improved working conditions, a more secure future. And this is the part I have a question about. An opportunity to own a stake in the taxi cab business for Brookline taxi cab drivers. So
Some drivers are
that-
owner-operators, and they should be, I feel, provided an opportunity to become medallion owners in order to continue their owner-operator status. And additional drivers may be interested, if they're able to finance it, to
But
purchase
our existing
medallions.
drivers aren't owners now, right?
Pardon?
Our existing drivers aren't generally owners right now, right?
There are about 15 of them that are.
Yeah.
They have business licenses.
You're
and
right, there are
acting
some,
licenses.
but that's 15 are pretty few. but-
Right, and I'm not specifying the number, I'm just saying it should be there. And the Transportation Board should be receptive to supporting that kind of scenario for drivers who are interested
Okay.
in investing in the business, investing in Brookline, and maintaining a stable relationship as providers of taxi service in Brookline.
All right.
I think there's a definite value in that for the town, for people
Can
who
you,
rely on
maybe you can
taxis.
describe that value? Because to be honest with you, I can't think of another industry where we do that. We don't try to get wait staff the ability to be stakeholders in the businesses that they work for in restaurants. Why do?
I think
I'm asking the petitioner, so why do we think differently about this than we do about the other
Because
businesses?
if taxi drivers are owners of a business, they have an incentive to stay here and do a good job and maintain high standards. We're not requiring it. We're only saying that it's an aim. It's something of value that should be considered during the administration of a medallion program and the regulation of the taxi industry in Brookline.
Okay, thank you.
I feel like it might be a reaction to the La Capra plan, which actually favored the large taxi cab companies over the smaller ones, and particularly over like individual ones.
Well, it was definitely a component of the La Capra plan was he thought that there was an efficiency to be gained from consolidation. And
And
yeah,
one of the companies
I'm
has
not stuck on the La
stated
Capra plan
as
either.
an aim to encourage their drivers to become owners. And at least one of the companies says, our future is as a dispatch business. We want to have owner-operators. We want the drivers to be our customers. And so they're seeing all these other disruptions that are going on, that more and more they need to be in a role of matching riders with taxis as opposed to other kinds of services. That's where the industry is going, and this focus would be part of that process. And Brookline has a very progressive taxi industry, I believe, and this is in line with that.
And is that a norm in other communities where the drivers are the owners and are
I
supported
don't
by
really
the
know. I
municipalities?
see, say, for example, when I go to Cambridge, or even when I go to Boston, I see a lot of OOs on the cars. Those are owner-operators.
Mhm. Okay.
I don't know the
Can I just add that it's very clear this is an industry in transition? It's not the one that existed when medallions were first discussed, I hate to say it, 10 years ago. And therefore, it seems to me, the language that offers that flexibility, it's a resolution after all, is appropriate whether or not it were to be realized exactly that way, but the my view is, we really do not know the nature of the taxi industry or what it will be in 5 years, particularly as the internet-driven competitors proliferate. And I would prefer not to be rigid or inflexible about what happens.
No.
That's kind of my view.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm not sure what's the best way to get to it, and I agree with Selectman DeWitt that we don't want a rigid approach at this time, because I do feel that it's important that the taxi industry remain in existence in some form in
Yes.
Brookline, because I think many of our seniors are much more comfortable with that than with the Uber model, at least so far. And there's some vetting of the taxi drivers and so forth under our licensing system, which isn't true for Uber.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid that, I think we want to be careful not to do something that's just going to sort of drive the taxi business completely out of Brookline.
What I'm trying to say is put it back in the hands of the Transportation Board and the Board of Selectmen. I think with the skills and commitment that exists there, that we can work it out.
Okay, so do we want to take Selectman Daley's suggestion and put it to a vote, even though we have not seen the
I'm comfortable.
Moderators Committee report?
I'm willing to also agree that we may wish to reconsider, but at this time, this language, to my mind, the language in 15 is not acceptable, and so I would vote against it
Okay.
regardless.
So you want to make that motion?
I'll move no action on Article 15.
All in favor of Selectman DeWitt's motion of no action, say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. And as to 16, I'll move that we recommend favorable action on warrant Article 16 as amended by the Advisory Committee. All those in favor say aye. Selectman Daley?
Aye.
Selectman DeWitt?
Aye.
Selectman Waschinsky?
Aye.
Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Thank you, everybody. That concludes our business for tonight. We are adjourned.